one of the main reasons of why I embarked on this journey of trying to, independently make an animated feature-length film is because the technology allowed me to. Like, there's no freaking way I would have even thought of doing this just literally like 2 years ago. Like, there's no way.
All right. Yes. It's been a long time since we've had you on the podcast.
Yeah, it's been like 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe even more. I think it
5 or
sometime.
6.
Yeah, sometime in 2017 is when it all started. But yeah,
Yeah. Lots has
yeah,
happened. You've went like full on the gas.
yeah. You can tell probably. Well, last time we spoke, well, not last time, just a few months ago. Last time, but last time we spoke on the podcast, that was like audio only. I had a lush, full head of hair, and now 5 years later, after intense periods of CGI work, this is what happens. So, and
Your
now
hair
you
leaves your
decide.
head.
Yeah, and now you decide to do video podcasts. So thanks for that, Ash. But this is so people can know what to expect, if you go down this road.
Yeah. I cover my shame with a beanie or a toque or whatever you call it. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of, I base everything based on the projects that we have done, and, everything kind of grows and stuff. And last night, as I was gearing my mind up to have this conversation with you via the podcast, I was like, let me go back through all of your work and like really get a grasp of how crazy things have been for you this past 5 or 6 years since the last podcast. I gotta tell you, it's really it's humbling and inspiring to see how fast and agile, like how fast you move through all this stuff. It's really wonderful. You've taken to so many new technologies and embraced them. Last time we spoke, I think it was Freight was the project that you were working on. I believe it was Freight. I could be wrong.
On the podcast or just in general? No, on the
Oh
podcast
no,
it was
podcast. Sorry, yeah.
no, on the podcast it was IFCC. Freight was later. Freight was like
That's
yeah.
right. I think you're showing me some stuff from it because I think at that time you were using Redshift and you were asking me about it. I think because the fog and the volume aspect of it, how strong it was and stuff. So yeah, man, IFCC. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm trying to track this. So if you're listening to the podcast and you don't know who Sava is, or if you didn't listen to the early episode, please just find it. We'll make it sure that we have links in the show notes for you, but that way you can kind of take that podcast and butt it up against this one. I think that your work is the work that I always share with people that have aspirations to merge their creative storytelling and also using new technologies to make them happen. I think that you're a perfect person for that in regards to referencing. I don't know how you feel about that, but yeah.
I mean, thanks for saying so, man. It's I mean, I don't know. I've never looked at it like that. I mean, the whole kind of Unreal Engine thing was sort of like a perfect storm, kind of a perfect moment as it kind of came out. But I mean, as you say, like when you look back at it, a similar thing happened. When I started kind of doing this stuff, started to focus on directing mainly. A similar thing happened to me with Octane as well, which is kind of what allowed me to dive into animation a little bit more. So it is kind of I didn't look at it like that back then, but it definitely had a big impact on kind of allowing me, providing me with the ability to do stuff, without a huge render farm, which was like insane just a couple of years ago. And now, fast forward, I mean, you look at it like in the grand scheme of things, like last time we spoke, it was 5 years ago, but like things have changed so drastically in those 5 years that it's insane. Even the stuff that I was able to do back then, at home, just how much it changed right now is just absolutely like incomparable. With Unreal, with all the MetaHuman stuff, it's just it allows me to do the stuff that I couldn't even imagine that I would be able to do in like my I don't know if my lifetime is the right example, but I don't. I'm kind of shit at predicting things. So
we
like,
all are.
Yeah, so like 3 years ago, if you asked me like, oh, if you do you want to use Unreal Engine, I would be like, hell no, like I'd be like, nah, that's not for me. And now I'm like the biggest fanboy ever. so things change quite.
Your old version of you sounds like me currently. So I'm like, wait, hold on. Yeah, that was one of the things I took away from when I was observing all your work, and apologies for interrupting, but the one thing I was really taken away from is like, I need to stop getting in my own way. I need to stop being comfortable with the tools that I have just because they're there, and I need to evolve past them. This is something I have in my show notes and things to talk about, but we're going to talk about the technical side of things, of course, too. But I don't want to just lump your work into that, because you're first and foremost, in my opinion, a director and a storyteller. And I think that's a real important thing to differentiate. But I think what makes you so unique in my eyes, because you're not here amongst the Hollywood system, you're out in Belgrade, you have to figure out your own way, which I think is wonderful. And your style evolves from that, which is also great. I always, people will get tired of me saying this, but I feel like style comes from all of the things that you've had to overcome. And everything that's rises to the surface is literally who you are. It's what you've dealt with and how you've overcome your adversities, and then that's who you become. And your style represents that, basically. But anyways, it's been really inspiring, because I'm like, man, I know it's not easy. I know it's super difficult. I know it's really challenging to flip to another language and communicate through it. But it's been really interesting to watch from afar, having no investment in the craft that you've had to do, and going, wow, that just seemed like it just happened, I
mean, looking back at it now, it does kind of seem like it just happened. It was a lot of work. It was definitely a lot of work back in the day. It was a lot of work as well. Just kind of leading up to it, because it's I've been sort of freelancing, and when I started learning 3D, like that was 2008, in my first year of like college, basically. So it took me like roughly towards the end of kind of college days. That's when I started freelancing. So that was like 2011, 2012. So there's that whole period of freelancing and doing odd jobs and just kind of, getting all the information sort of under my belt, and all these kind of ideas and inspirations and whatnot and things that I wanted to do. And then it was kind of the perfect storm sort of around that 2016-17 period where Octane came out. I had all these, ideas boiling, and all these things that I've started doing with, friends from here, and like all these things we wanted to do together. I've spoken highly of you before, so I'll do it again. But that was the period when the collective podcast and all of that stuff was like a huge inspiration for me. So I can't thank you enough for that. And that was just kind of leading up to like, all right, we need to do something together. The friends of mine and myself, and that's kind of how we started basically doing this stuff. But it took a lot of time to get to that point, and it was if we've done it some years earlier, we wouldn't have been prepared. If we've done it, the technology wouldn't have been there. So it's a little bit of it's a lot of hard work, but timing of things is like equally as important as well. I kind of attribute one of the kind of big important moments, I guess, of what kickstarted my directing career was that IFCC short film. That was done at a point in time where there's all these title sequences being done, and they were the main thing basically in the kind of motion design community. And people were getting a little bit more comfortable with characters and telling stories, but one limitation that everyone had was character animation. Like that's by far, like that's something super difficult. And even though you could find stock animations and stuff like that, whenever you use a stock animation, it just looks like a stock animation. You can't do anything specific with it. So I was very, very lucky at the time to have the help of Take One, the local animation and motion capture studio that I still work with today.
This is Danilo's company, right?
Yeah, Danilo's company. Yeah.
He's a sweetheart.
So that was, I mean, Danilo is one of the guys who he's sort of like he's been sort of like a silent producer on a bunch of short films that we've done together. So and then he's been a huge part in the last couple of years in my life, especially. I look at him as one of my mentors, really. That was kind of one of the huge advantages that I had at the time was having access to a professional mocap studio, which is not something, it's not something you find just around the corner lurking.
Sure.
So that played huge advantage in kind of allowing me to do that and to tell that story in a way that at the time, like, it wasn't, nobody else could, I think. I think that was even before, like, all the smart suits, like the Rococo and Xsense and whatnot, that you can kind of get and do that stuff. It was just, character animation was just like such a
void. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, it still is, absolutely. Like, it still is. Like, if you want to do it properly, it still absolutely is. But yeah, it's a bit of a lot of hard work, a bit of luck, a bit of timing, and it all kind of happened, like you say. It all kind of worked out.
I love how you're so nonchalant and casual about it, because I know how hard you work, and I know how much effort it takes in order for you to bring forth these ideas and these concepts and these projects from within. You're a huge collaborator. You're a quintessential director, because your work is connected intrinsically to your friends that you have trust in, with their taste aligning with yours. And that is a very, I'd say that's a very unique thing. But you're also really into cinematography and the design of things, and which is great, because you have a fundamental thing. One thing I was watching, and I'm just writing down notes as we go, and you know how this podcast is just super random. Yeah. But the one thing that I loved, you have a Spielberg style blocking, and I think it's. I mean, hopefully that's a praise. He's the king. That's all.
I mean, he's the best. It's absolutely a praise.
Yeah, I don't know if that's intended, but like when I watch your work and how you're pushing me through your scenes, I tend to be very, and I think my style comes from the fact that I got to deal with this old world approach to making things, which is like. Mm-hmm. Super slow and gray frames and slowly working through it. But when I see your style as it's evolving using these new tools, I'm seeing that you're able to really go, oh, I can turn this one scene into 10 moves, and I didn't even think about this idea. Anyways, blocking is one thing that I really wanted to touch on, because I feel it's very unique for you in particular.
I mean, it is, but it's not really something, like, honestly, like, this is where my, this is where my kind of, I guess, self-taught kind of way of learning things comes out a little bit, because I wasn't, none of us was, I mean, not none of it, but I personally, like, wasn't trained in this stuff, so I had to kind of learn things on my own. And it all kind of comes from, this love of cinema that I've always had as I was growing up. It's not something that I've knew, I guess, like, necessarily. I guess it's the same story for everyone. It's not something you can do at all, and then somehow you kind of find your way to it. Yeah. So it's a lot of those things are kind of ingrained almost in me, kind of, almost subconsciously, like, I guess the taste. And then, a lot of the things, like when it comes to blocking and stuff like that, that stuff, I mean, almost kind of came naturally. I mean, I don't remember like particularly focusing on learning specific aspects of blocking. It was just kind of learning by doing, basically, on every single project. So it was, for example, like IFCC, a lot of my early work, like IFCC and Freight, it's all like single characters, so it's a lot easier to do that stuff when you just have a singular character. And then a lot of the, I guess, like the advantages of motion capture and animation is, like, if you were shooting that on a live action, you would have shot it on the day and that's it. Like, that's your opportunity to shoot it. Yeah. But with motion capture, like, you record emotions on the day, and then once you bring the motions back into 3D, well, then you have all the time in the world to explore the scenes and to, find your shots and to experiment with blocking, basically. So I think, like, that's where kind of I've learned about the blocking process, and kind of how I've fine-tuned it is through the process of making those. And then I didn't even realize that, but when we actually shot the radiation, like, we had very little prep for that. We had I think, like, I spoke to who's my composer, but he also plays the main character in that one. So I spoke to him, like, we rehearsed it, the two of us, just like what he's meant to be doing. But then we had very limited time before the shoot. So the other call with the other two actors, we had like just a call a night before the shoot, and that was it. Like, that was our prep time, quote unquote. And then on the day, like, things, I don't want to say just worked out, but they kind of did as well. It's weird. And then, like, you don't really think about it. You bring it all into 3D, into Unreal, and then, everything just kind of works. Like, pacing and timing wise, we had kind of what we needed to have for the coverage later on. So it's just, I don't know, it's this weird intuitive process. I don't really know how to, it's taken me a lot of time to learn, I guess, how to express the things that I've learned.
Sure.
It's very difficult. But
well, you have a meeting with us hating out and stuff. You have an optimistic, positive aura about yourself, and I think you intrinsically need to have that when you embark on this voyage of being a director. Especially, I mean, a director in any kind of capacity is, you're basically going up against the laws of nature in a lot of ways, because you're constantly you have this vision of a reality inside of yourself and your mind and your soul and whatever you want to call it, but the world doesn't work like that, so you have to invent it. And as you invent it, it becomes very daunting, because it's difficult and it's constantly going and going against your intention, I think, because that's just how it works. And then you realize, like, oh, my style is coming from that a little bit too, like me overcoming these things, the potential Hollywood system or of these different things. You find your own way to do them. You're an artist that doesn't ask for permission. You just go and make it. And then you seem like you're a director. I've not worked with you, but you seem like a director is like, oh, there's a problem here. Okay, well, what's the smartest, fastest, cleverest way around this? Okay, let's just go that route, and then let's keep moving. Is right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the things, like, going back to one of your kind of earlier statements about style, and kind of, it kind of manifests itself from how did you put it? Like, from all the mistakes and all the work that you've done. I think it's definitely the case in the kind of it's definitely what happened in my case. How that style evolved. I think it's a lot of, especially when it comes to cinematography and when it comes to blocking and stuff like that, a lot of it did come from limitations. Even though I had access to motion capture, there is still, limited things you can do to kind of tell a story, and kind of, back in the day when we were doing it, we didn't, we didn't have huge budgets for those shorts, so we still needed to keep them fairly simple. So, like, we've made a bunch of jokes ourselves that, like, every single short we were making is just about a guy walking, and occasionally he falls down or stands up, and, like, if you look at it like that, like, literally, like, that's what happens. Like, you can
don't throw it. Ah, damn! Now I can't see it. I can't see it any other way. Yeah, Freight's the same way.
It's literally that. Well, it's like limitations, and then doing kind of working around that in a smart way, and hopefully a smart way, and it's kind of one of the better examples of that was from the IFCC one, where we had this whole kind of portal thing, which was very important to the story. But like we were very limited with the effects abilities at the time and how we're gonna make a freaking portal.
The flip
and then
world,
it was
right?
literally just like a box, like with a metal shader on it, just rotating and kind of slamming.
So
and that
cool.
turned out to be like the best thing in the whole thing. And it's like
again
finding interesting solutions from those limitations. And I think like that's one of the things. Like if you had unlimited budgets and unlimited resources and unlimited, I kind of feel like you would end up with something boring, because I kind of feel like when you do have those limitations, whatever they are, you have to push yourself to find some creative solution to that problem, and that's what becomes like the most interesting thing about that particular scene or that particular moment or whatever it is.
And restraints are important.
It's also one of those things, like even like for example, like specifically cinematography wise, like I'm not a great animator. I'm actually a very poor animator. I'll share some of the skeletons in my closet, but because I think that's always funny when we go into these talks. But for example, like I've never used curves in animation, like never, not once. I always just use like the auto key, like the most simplest version of just your regular auto key, and that's it. I don't open up curves, and it works for me. If it works, it works, and that's kind of the approach. But that being said, like I lack kind of the precision of animating stuff, and like specifically when it comes to cameras, I kind of immediately wanted to kind of dial down or dial back the kind of the camera moves themselves and make them a lot more subtle, and then that played into the fact of kind of I guess approaching shooting, like when you're in this 3D CG space, you have the unlimited ability to do whatever the hell you want. Like you have the best camera gear, you have the best rigs, you have the best Steadicams and whatnot, you have everything. But that's one of the kind of core philosophies, is like, if just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So my approach to even now is like approaching the shoot as if I'm shooting it with a very low budget, just using like tripods and pans and tilts and stuff like that, locked off cameras as much as possible. And then if it's a moving camera, then it's going to be like a cheap version of a Steadicam or an Easy Rig or something like that. And if I do like a fancy camera move, there'll be like only one shot per film, basically. So like, for example, in Irradiation, there's a shot at the end where the camera rotates, and that would have to be like a gimbal sort of a thing, like a robotic arm control or whatever it is. But that's reserved for a single shot. Like you're not going to do that across the whole thing. And then that one shot has an additional, I guess, impact compared to everything else. It's just kind of contrasting stuff like that. So that's like you say, I think like from thinking of limitations and then applying like fictional limitations, applying them on your like fictional non-existing 3D cameras, I think it just helps ground the work that much more. A lot of the
makes
times
it more familiar too.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the times, like when you have those crazy camera moves in 3D, like that's the immediate like disconnect with the audience. But when you ground it in something that feels a little bit more real, I think it does a lot.
Well, it's what you're doing is you're speaking the language of film. Film has been captured on tripods and locked shots for millennia, basically, because they're like, well, this thing is heavy and Let's just make a thing that we could put it on. Oh, now we need to move it down. Okay. And then the tripod is invented, and then, oh, now we need to move. So let's get a dolly. Oh, let's put the tripod on a thing that moves. Oh, let's use tracks. Okay. And then the tracks would wiggle, and, oh, we need steady. Oh, now then the steady cam happened. And then, Stanley used it for the Shining. It was used for Rocky, I think, a little bit prior to that. I think Rocky came out after the Shining. I can't remember. There's something where the Steadicam op was flying back and forth, and Stanley was like obsessed with the guy. But anyways, but yeah, I think using traditional film mediums makes your films that are in the computer, which should be unfamiliar to us, somewhat familiar, because you're using that language of storytelling by sequence and by composition, and that actually there's all these different talks on that school of thought where there is no rules. And I would say, yeah, there is no rules if you think like that, but I believe that there are rules of my own, and there are rules for you as well. Like when I'm doing this certain type of shot, I want this certain feel. An example that comes to mind is when Roger Deakins was shooting Sicario. I was sitting in the theater, and there was this high tension moment between Kate and Josh's character, and it was a wide shot, and they were arguing really small. And I remember sitting there in the theater, and I didn't mean for it to pull me out, and it didn't necessarily. But I love film, and I'm a huge Deakins fan. But I remember going like, "Whoa, they just did an argument in a wide," and I thought to myself, why are they doing that? And I thought maybe they're trying to show how insignificant they are and how petty their argument is. Because normally you'd get closer and you'd do shaky cam and you'd add the tension to the camera. And I thought to myself, what brilliant, because I remember hearing Roger talking about that shot.
Is that the shot? Yeah, that must be the shot that he was talking about. Yeah, because I know I binged the heck out of their podcast, the Team Deakins
outstanding.
podcast.
Him and James, I love them.
They keep bringing back that discussion with Denis Villeneuve, and I think that must be that shot where Denis said basically something along the lines of kind of Deakins wanted to offer like, do we want to shoot close-ups for this because we have time? And then Denny said something along the lines of, well, if we do, I'm afraid I might use it.
Yes, that's right. And it was a moment in the film where I thought, I've not seen that done in a while, where it was so, again, it's all in the subtleties. That's a subtle flex of mastery in my mind. When I watched it, I was like, wow, like the restraint. And so when I see that, when I feel it as a viewer, then I study it as a film lover, and then I watch it and all these things, I start to think to myself like, there's so many levels to this craft, and a lot of it, in my opinion, comes from the subtleties of it, and it's all about the subtleties and using those subtleties. So back to rules and lack of thereof, I think it's smart of you to incorporate in your blocking and filmmaking, in my opinion, to utilize what's the building foundations of what the masters have made in the past. How could you ignore it? Kurosawa's blocking, if you watch some of his films, depending on which ones you watch, the blocking's incredible. And I know for a fact that all of those guys were using those films as an inspiration, because you could see it throughout their work if you watch closely. You can see some of Kurosawa's work inside of even Jurassic Park, like those things that were taught to those filmmakers at that early age. It's pretty interesting. Yeah.
I mean, especially, at the time, like that was like the highest of standards. Like now you have just an overabundance of visual references like hitting you left and right from all different directions. But absolutely, like you can see that. I mean, people are referencing Kurosawa even today. But I love that. I love that analogy kind of that shot from Sicario. Like that's that thinking. I've listened so many times to the Team Deakins podcast as well. I've like re-listened a bunch of episodes. I just think it's like probably one of the best resources you can find online today. It. Like
so
it's
good,
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's
where else can you hear a master talk so openly about their craft and bring other masters in? It's so unique. Yeah.
Yeah.
Team Deakins.
That's the stuff that that's the stuff that resonates with me incredibly, and that was I distinctly remember like that was in the period where I was creating Irradiation, like I was just listening to the podcast and making the shots, and it was like this amazing synergy of like
Roger's right with you.
Like Roger's right with me. He's directing my cinematography through me through the podcast. It was fantastic. But yeah, no, I've seriously, like I've learned a ton, and even when you like when you don't necessarily when you just hear an opinion that kind of just aligns with your inner kind of, I guess, way of thinking of things, but you weren't necessarily able to communicate it before, or to kind of I guess put it into
articulate
it. It's one of those things that happens to me a lot. Like I know, like one of the most interesting, I know we're just kind of jumping around right now, but
it's okay.
One of the kind of, to that point, one of the more interesting things that kind of happened in the whole kind of irradiation process, towards the end of creating that one, I distinctly remember like when I had a conversation with Danilo, and all of the choices and everything like was very, very deliberate. But then there was this one thing that Danilo basically told me that immediately like crystallized like the way I feel about it, but I just wasn't able to put it in such an eloquent way as he was. And he basically said it's kind of because like the whole thing with Irradiation is and kind of, I guess, with the approach to filmmaking that I was doing earlier, that was more visually driven. There was like very little to no dialogue at all, so it's all like purely visual storytelling. So it's all about like leaving those nuggets to the viewer and like letting the viewer try to decipher what this means, and maybe it means something different to them, and like that's the beauty of it. But the way he phrased it was kind of, we were sitting at his place, and he had this was it like an icon? What do you call it? Like it's like a wood carving of a saint, basically. Like every family here, like we have this kind of like this thing called Slava. Every family, every household celebrates a saint once a year, and it's like a family gathering event and stuff like that. So he had like a wood carving on a wall of one of the saints, and like the halo was carved out completely, so that it's completely empty. So all you see is like a white wall behind it. But you can see it clear as day. Like that's the first thing you see, because it's such a high contrast to everything. And it's like the way he called that effect was like the hole. It's a hole. It's an absence of information. It's an absence of material in this instance. But you can see exactly and very clearly what it is. It's a halo. It's a shape of a halo. And it's kind of the same approach, when you apply it to like the storytelling, and I guess like that kind of defines what kind of a filmmaker are you, is kind of how big of a hole do you want to build to your audience, like how big of the absence of information do you want to carve out of your story? Do you want to just poke small holes and let the audience see it for what it is, and they can fill those holes very easily? Or do you want to build a little bit of a bigger hole, so then they can't really see what it is, and they have to kind of figure it out themselves? Or is it going to be a hole that's like so contrasted to everything else that it's going to be clear as day, like that's what it is? So it's a very interesting way of putting it, and that kind of coincides with my creative process very much, and the style and the type of films that I want to make. But I was never able to put it like that, basically.
It's how much you feed the audience or not. I think that's interesting. There's different ways of thinking about that, obviously. Like, people would consider like art house films or artsy films as when there's a bigger hole that you have to work harder for, to fill in the blanks. And, films like Enemy come to mind, a film that leaves a lot to be discovered, which I think is fascinating. But not everybody wants to be challenged. Some people want to just be entertained, which is totally understandable as well, which makes it fascinating. The thing that I caught in what you were saying, which I thought was really interesting, and one real quick segue, I was watching Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Have you seen Nausicaa? It's an older.
No.
Oh, it's a very. I think you would actually love it. It's a wonderful Miyazaki film, the Studio Ghibli old film, but it's wonderful. No. But it's filled with a lot of. I don't know. It's filled with a lot of. I mean, it's intended for children, but it also plays on an adult level because it's dealing with such heavy topics and stuff. But it's filled with a lot of dialogue that just doesn't really need to be there. But it's there because I think they were worried that kids wouldn't understand what was happening, which I think no matter what, kids will grasp it. But it's a whole different thing. But anyways, since you haven't seen it, it's filled with a lot of exposition, I think it's called, and Nolan does a lot in his films too, and especially like Inception. It's like, what are we doing? And then here's what's happening, so that these big concepts that he has are actually bringing home, so that the general person can understand it. But then on rewatch, it's really hard because you're like, I already know this. Why are you telling me? And then it becomes hard to rewatch. But anyways, it doesn't matter. I mean, on first watch is what matters most, and then rewatchable is a different thing. But one of the things you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, and again, I think to talk about style, is in the beginning of your directing, everything was driven by non-narrative storytelling visually, right?
Yeah.
And I know from our talks outside of the podcast that you're now evolving once more into this narrative aspect. Do you think it's good that you started with non-narrative visual storytelling and then now evolving? Do you think that you can rest on that? You're like, oh shit, if I can't figure this out narratively, I can figure it out visually. Is that the case, you think?
No, I absolutely. I guess it's different ways to look at it. I mean, I kind of, there's a reason like why I started like purely visually. Like on one end, it was a set of limitations, but also on the other end is, there's technical limitations, but there's also like, I guess, skill limitations as well. Right. Like when you, I guess like what most of us self-taught directors dread the most probably is like, oh, how do I write dialogue? Like when you have to do everything yourself. So when you do the first one, it's always a little bit like, oh, this feels like this is gonna be cringy. This feels, I mean, it still feels like that today, but there's a lot of that going on. Like when you're just starting out, when you're just making your first one, I would say odds are that it probably is gonna be bad the first time around. So I think like doing yourself a favor and doing yourself a service is kind of like ditch the dialogue, just focus on the visuals. It's also like it also feels to me like, I don't know, it's different for different people, but for me it felt like I was maybe skipping a step, and I tried to think of it I tried to think of every single thing that I've done so far as like taking it one step at a time, basically, not skipping like 5 steps or a step even. So it was starting off like even if you break it down like that, like IFCC was purely visual, no dialogue, no face, because face is like a technical nightmare. Then Freight was no dialogue, but yes face. It was a weird alien face, and it did very little. It was beautifully animated, but it was just a few poses basically. So it was like one step at a time. And then it was. I actually had a project before Irradiation that will never see the light of day, unfortunately. But that was it was one of the Axis projects that I've done, which unfortunately is again like
Axis is an animation company as well.
Yes, yeah. That's the people that's for anyone who listens, like that's and Axis is an animation studio from Scotland. They do a bunch of game cinematics and Love, Death and Robots and whatnot, and that's where I do all my client work. But there was one project that got canned. We finished it completely, but that was my first like an actual script that I wrote with dialogue in it, and I was pretty proud of that one. And unfortunately, it never saw the light of day. But that was kind of like in English, which was always weird for me as well. I mean, I get by with English, but it's not my first language, and I still don't really think in English. Like it takes me a moment, and especially like when writing, it always feels to me like, whatever I write, it always feels, especially when it comes to dialogue, it feels like, oh, is this cringe? Is this working?
Yeah,
is this
interesting.
And then usually what happens is when I hear it from the actors, I feel like, oh yeah, well, it's, it works. Mm-hmm. But it's just because it's, I guess, my brain processing it. It's a little bit weird.
I never thought about that. That's interesting.
It's strange, yeah. And but on the other hand, like what's really strange as well when it comes to writing specifically for me is I don't write in Serbian. Like like everything regarding filmmaking, script wise, ideas for scripts, I always just write it in English because like that's kind of how I learned it basically. And I don't know if I can write it in Serbian. Like it's really weird.
Huh. That's interesting.
It's like
have you tried?
I did. It's just weird. It's just weird because like
you should.
I don't know, like
I think it'd be cool. Serbian with subtitles, make us read.
well, yeah. Well, that's that. Well, like what I was going to say
Radiation.
is
You used it, which I thought was brilliant. I love
that. Was yeah. So that was in Russian. Yeah. So that was.
I know
that
it's in
was
Russian. I just love the texture of being an English speaker and an American. I just. When I was like, oh wow, this is sick. Like it adds even more.
And that's what I was gonna say is basically like, so that thing didn't came out before Radiation, but with the Radiation, it was like a no brainer. Like this is set in like this post Chernobyl setting. Like it needs to be authentic. It can't be English with Russian accent. Basically, it needs to be proper.
That's right, baby.
And that was on one end, like that was really helpful because in terms of kind of that is this good moment when you hear the actors perform it or when you hear the lines, because it's all of a sudden it's a different language. I don't speak Russian. Like that's one funny thing. Like a lot of people assumed I speak Russian after Radiation, but I don't. There's these things called translators.
What? No way. You use technology again? Wow, I can't believe you're using technology.
No. On that one we used actual people. I should have said people, not things. But
it's typical director. Hey man, people aren't your things, okay? Yeah.
This is horrible. This is
it's gonna get you into trouble. I'm saving that one.
But basically that was a big. On the other hand, like that brought like a different set of interesting kind of things. It was I guess just the acting style of kind of English versus Russian is very different.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that I would kind of have the voice actors kind of enunciate, like they just wouldn't. And not to say that they wouldn't because they didn't want to, but it's just like to them, like this doesn't feel real. Like it's not. And they kept saying to me, like, this is not how we talk. And I'm like, all right, well, do it then like how you do it because like we want to be authentic.
Yeah.
But it's just, I realize like right now there's been a lot of weird language barriers happening like around.
It's really fascinating though. Honestly, I think it's amazing because you're mentioning that it's sometimes difficult with you with English, but I never noticed it. I think it's fantastic. And I think it's wonderful that, I mean, you're high functioning because if you think about it, you have so many reasons why not to do what you're doing. If you think about it, like really think about it, like, like you have to learn all these different languages and you have to learn all these different programs and you have to put yourself out there and you have to try all these different things and like, but you have such a wonderful spirit, Sava. It's wonderful and you should celebrate it. It's awesome. It's inspiring.
Thanks for saying that. I celebrated a little bit before our call just to ease out.
Good. Proper Serbian or what?
A bit of a moonshine. We'll have to get some of that for you, Ash.
Oh man, I can't wait to visit you and be in your beautiful place. I've heard wonderful things and I'm excited. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, next time you're in this neck of the woods, we're definitely doing some of that. But also, next time I'm in your neck of the woods, I might try to smuggle some on board. But we'll see.
Some Thai iced tea, I know. Yeah. When we met, we had dinner, and there's this wonderful Thai place near where I live, and we went there, And I love this place. It's one of my favorite places. And that was the first time you had tried Thai iced tea, and it's like
it's phenomenal.
One of the great pleasures in life is to show friends food they haven't had, because food and music are the universal loves of life, you know. And it was so cool watching you like go, whoa, what is this?
It's absolutely fantastic. That's one of the things like I really love the States for, is like the abundance of choice in like real authentic food from all different corners of the world. We don't have that here. We have really good local food, but it's not like, when it comes to diversity of other cultures, we have that as well, but it's not as authentic as it is over there. So
sure,
I miss it. I'll definitely we'll have to repeat that.
I've been trying to find a replacement for you to do it like instant, because I go to different markets and I've not found one that's good enough to recommend. So I'm still on this quest, but Thai iced tea is incredible. It's and I think the thing I love about it is it's perfect for Thai food, because traditionally Thai food can be very spicy and heavy on the spice. So you have this cool iced tea with creamer, and I think it's some sort of like condensed cream or something. And then that just it neutralizes all the spice, which makes it wonderful. So, but anyways, it was one of my favorite things when you came. I was like, I can't believe it's so awesome that you're
absolutely, man. It beats the McLaren, honestly.
That's right. The McLaren was. Why didn't take you for a ride in it? Is you didn't have.
I do regret that slightly. I do slightly regret that. Although
was it raining? I think it was raining. I think it was raining.
I think it was starting to rain or something like that. I know, like the very next day in LA, I got completely soaked.
That's right.
So that was fun, but I'm much more of a food guy than a car guy. So I really appreciate that.
One is way cooler and way more affordable. Yeah. You can. Yeah. That's right. The 765 was in the garage. That was crazy. That thing was like I went full on Gollum Ring, like evil with that car. It was horrible. So I'm so glad they took it away from me. But
they're going to be sending a new one any day now. But,
that'd be nice. Yeah, that'd be awesome. One of the things you mentioned, and something that I get lost with as well, is when you listen to other creatives. I know that you and I both, and probably a lot of people on this, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you absorb a lot of other people's thoughts and other people's ways of doing things. I know that you mentioned listening to a lot of Team Deacon's podcasts and stuff. Is there, at some point, do you go, okay, I've absorbed too much of this? Because this is one thing I'm always concerned with, like, oh crap, like the reason why Roger Deakins is so good, in my opinion, is because he's been doing it with passion for his whole life. And so we're getting a sense of himself through the work, and he's eventually carved out a niche because he's put himself into his work for such a long period of time. And then I realize I don't think it's fair for myself and for him if I just go, well, he says this is the way, and then I don't do my own approach, Is that something that you process and think about a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not, I've listened pretty much to every single episode of the podcast, but it's not something, every second one I have a ton of things that I disagree with, or, that are not my approaches, or, but it's still so inspiring and so informative to hear other people's perspective and processes, So I have that as well, and I also have, I think it's like similar with films and TV shows. Like I usually have like periods of time where I'm in high consumption mode, I guess, where I would just like consume. Like when the Team Deacons podcast came out, I think like I was listening like to, I don't know, like 3 or 4 episodes a day, basically. Like they were
8 hours or so.
When it piled on, basically, I had like a lot of work at the time, and I would just like play it, no music, no nothing. I would just be playing the podcast all day long. Yeah. But then eventually, like, after a month, like you're like, all right, I need a break.
Sure. Yeah, you can overdose.
It's information overdose. So it's I do that a lot. I would like consume things a lot in one sitting, kind of in one go. Similar with films, I would kind of probably like spend weeks and weeks kind of watching films, and then I just there comes a time where I don't watch anything for like half a year. Not even like a TV show or nothing. Like, and it's not even just the saturation. The personal.
I do the same thing.
Like, I just need to kind of shut off for a little bit, and I kind of almost fear that that I'll be too influenced by something. I think that's something I kind of fear happens a lot of times with especially like your favorite filmmakers. You know, like for example, like, I mean, I know like we shared the kind of the love for Denis Villeneuve's films.
Sure.
And that's like he's definitely one of my favorites right now, and I kind of feel like, oh man, if I need to take a break from his stuff, because I feel it will find the way into my work, and it's I think
you're not giving to him too. If you're just taking from him and regurgitating, you're not giving him what he needs, which is also to be inspired as well.
So yeah, there's definitely times where I just kind of step away, and I mean, I guess
saturate. Well, you saturate, then break, and saturate and break. I have the same rhythm where I consume a lot, and then I go, okay, that's enough, and then I just need to play around with it. You're actually one of the, like, 3 or 4 people that have seen my latest film, and it's interesting to see your reaction to it. That was fun when you came to the house, and I was like, let me see what you think of this, and then I was just more or less curious, and your reaction was really wonderful. But I think what I'm getting at here is that I'm with that project, and I think you're probably similar, is you take all of these things that you're interested in, and then you find ways to put yourself into it and put yourself through it. And that's a really complicated, weird kind of a struggle, not to get lost in others. That's what I always call it, like, don't get lost in another, because it almost does more harm to the creative community if you're just regurgitating what has already existed, or a watered down version of what you think that person would do, which I think is fascinating. It's really hard to do, though.
It's really hard to do. It's something I'm definitely very conscious of. Whenever whenever there's a new thing on the horizon, whatever we choose to do, it's always like, even like to our detriment, is like we spend a lot of time, in the way Milan, my good friend, concept artist, and is the composer, and like we always, like, that's the kind of the core team where we start talking about the ideas and what we want to do and the stories that we want to do, I guess we spend way too much time thinking of, like, does this bear any resemblance to anything else that we like? And a lot of the times, like, I mean, there's always gonna be something in there, I think, even when you're I guess, I don't know, like, do you want to be careful about that, because it's like inspiration, and a lot of the time, like, it's inspiration that's kind of engraved in you. It might be like something that you've seen years ago and you don't even realize it, and then you've kind of manifested it in a way. So I don't know. It's a weird line, kind of, where you draw that.
That's a difficult conversation to have, though, if you think about it, because there isn't. I mean, I don't know what part of the world you think about this, but I think that there's no such thing as an original thought, and necessarily a great thought is a combination of many thoughts, and that's how I look at it. And a piece of work is a culmination of many works. And I think potentially, let's just use like Denny as a perfect example, being this current director that we're all focusing our spotlight on. I think that his style and his filmmaking comes from a lot of influences that I can see in his work. And I think the more influences that you can put into it and vary it and create some distance between yourself and your inspirations, I think that you can create something quote unquote new. There's no such thing, in my opinion, because it's all been done. Everything is basically a really great remix. It's just how you remix it, especially if you're really schooled in any field, let's say like literature or film. If you really understand a big wealth of films, if you watch a film, a new one, you will see all of the influences, because you go, oh, this came from that came from that. Whether they knew it or not, these are things that are all kind of clustered together. We're seeing it with AI, actually, because AI can net out really big and gather and go and do it very quickly too, which is really fascinating. But Yeah, that's a tough conversation to have, because it can also, for new creators out there, it can be detrimental, because you're sitting there going, the pressure's on me, the world pressure's on me to make something new, and what am I supposed to do? And then you have this thing called artist block, and then it's depression and all that stuff kind of occurs. How do you get past that threshold of going, okay, I have this idea, oh shit, it's too much like this thing. At that point, when you go and make that, how do you decipher and move to the next stage, which is to create something?
Oh yeah, that's let me see if I can answer that question.
Big question. And this is something that all creatives should be processing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like it's this the process as it stands right now. It always starts from the page. It's something that I focused on in the last couple of years when I started directing professionally. Is like when you're first starting out when you're kind of starting out to pursue this kind of filmmaking journey, whether it's animation or live action or whatnot, and you don't know how to do it necessarily. I guess a lot of us, like when we started, is gather references, gather a bunch of visual references, and then from that you'll kind of stem an idea or something, and like that's kind of how it started at the beginning for us. Like that's kind of how we did IFCC. Is it was a lot of visual references and kind of just thinking about different things: photography, films, animations, whatever, you name it. But then as the kind of this journey of learning directing kind of progressed, I focused on relying much less on that and relying on writing, basically. So it all starts from just a page and just like text on page, essentially. Mm-hmm. It all starts from the conversations first, but then it all starts from just the written ideas. And I kind of feel like that distances myself a little bit more from any kind of particular visuals and particular visual references. I know there's like a conversation you had with Anthony the other few weeks. It's kind of similar to the whole, do you storyboard or not? Do you previs or not? Because when you get to the location, it's going to be 10 times more interesting than what you can storyboard.
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar with this as well. It kind of feels like, I don't necessarily want to swamp myself with references all that much, because I know once we actually get to the concepting stage, we're going to be able to flesh something out that just feels a little bit more like us. And that's where when I work with Milan, who's very, very unique in his art style, that's the kind of, a lot of the times that's the kind of reference that I have in my mind when I approach the stories. It's always like, well, I know Milan's going to be a part of it, so I don't even want to bother kind of exploring stuff visually at the very start, even before I have the script written down. I want to focus my time and attention only on the script and only on the kind of the core of the story, or what the story is about. And then if that works, I honestly feel like the rest of it is easy. It's a lot of grind. It's a lot of hard work, but I kind of find it easier than coming up with that original idea and that story. I mean, original, quote unquote, but I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, to quote what you said earlier, is that you were saying that you have to throw yourself into it. You can't just sit there and ponder. And then that is putting forth the effort to just do something. And as you mentioned before, like most likely the first thing you write is not going to be brilliant. It's usually the 100th thing that you've written where you've had enough mileage, but you have to be okay with just falling on your face and failing, and that's a difficult thing. Yeah,
it is. And that's where, I guess that's where all the other elements of filmmaking come into play. It's, if you have this, let's call it like a broader vision of everything else that's going to come into play, like that, even though the writing might be bare bones, even though you might have like a dialogue sequence that's very, very bare bones and dry, like you can salvage so much of it just by the way you shoot it, the way you light it, the way the music is going to come into play in the edit and all of that stuff, and sound. And then you can take something that's very, very bare bones and make it into something a little bit less bare bones.
Sure. If your taste and style takes you there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I always think about George Lucas when he was making Star Wars. I don't know the first cut that George did, but I heard it was like over the top and just really just filled with a bunch of stuff that he was precious about. And then his friends came in and just chopped it to pieces and then got to the core of what it was.
Being Francis Ford Coppola and who else
was his wife was the editor, and he was amongst great people, obviously. That's one thing that we talked a lot about too at dinner is that, when you're out in Belgrade, I'm out here in Southern California, and Anthony's up north, and all of the people in our network, we're all kind of we're from our computers and we're wherever we are, but we're kind of on our own quest, which is also really wonderful. But at the same time, sometimes I think to myself, like, maybe it would be good if we talked a little bit more, and that's one thing I try to make more effort of, because I felt like we're all on similar courses, which is great that we're doing it all individually and alone in a sense, like in our own little bubble. But sometimes I feel like there was a reason why American Zoetrope was so special, and I think it didn't last for certain reasons, because I think it wasn't meant to last, but I think it was a wonderful thing for them to have a collective of minds, because especially at that very inset point for them as filmmakers, they all realize like, oh, I'm different from that person. Oh, my style is weird from that. But at the same time, that's a good point of friction, not friction in the sense of this is bad. It's almost like this is great that we're all different, but we can support one another. And also, I never heard of this reference that you're using. Oh my God. And then all of a sudden, sharing that, and then production sharing as well, which is one of the biggest things too. But something that came to mind, you're only as strong as your network in a lot of situations, especially like getting to know your process more. Like you're intrinsically connected to your collaborators, you're like an old world director with new world technology, but also new world process, which is really it's really interesting as a concept too.
Somewhere in between. I think you kind of that's something I couldn't have formulated myself. That's a really, really nice way to put it.
These are therapy sessions.
and they are fantastic at that as well. But it's, and also not to brush off like on the whole thing about, us talking more, and that's again like tying it back to the whole appreciation of what you've done with the podcast. Like that feels like that did it for me, sort of a thing. So it's when the time came for the two of us to meet, and that it kind of, well, weirdly enough for me it felt like I knew you for a while, which was weird for you.
Yeah, it's always weird. I've met some friends recently that I've watched on YouTube only, and I'm like, this is weird that my YouTube is talking to me.
It's super weird. I told you the other day, like when I met Ryan Connolly from Film Riot, and it was just like on a video call like this, and it's like I've been watching him for like 10 years on YouTube. It's just like holy like what is this? Like it's literally like YouTube talking back at me.
It's a future friend, I think. Well, a lot of the times I call all these people that I read books of, they're just my mentors, like Bruce Lee was one of my early mentors as a kid, like reading his books and I acknowledging his brilliance, and then it turned into like all these different philosophies, because I was like, well, what was he inspired by? And then all these things kind of came from it. But they're just kind of mentors, and now it's a future-based form. It's almost like, meeting Joe Rogan or something like that. It's like, oh, I've spent so many hours listening to you talk about life.
Yeah.
You don't know me, but I know you, kind of.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fascinating conundrum in a sense, if you think about it. Yeah. But
But yeah, man, I don't know, like in terms of the whole kind of where kind of how you described kind of where, I mean, collaboration is definitely one of the cornerstones, I guess, of my process as well. I think it's something we touched on previously regarding language and stuff like that, and I think like what's interesting about, and it's, I mean, it's not necessarily interesting, but I think it all stems from insecurities. It's all kind of similarly to, hey, I'm learning a new software and I made a render, or I'm learning how to paint and I made this, so I'm not gonna just post it in the either. I'm gonna show it to my friends, kind of squeamishly, and then I'm gonna see their reactions, and that kind of thing. So like you're making images and you're creating animations and making films for a long time, and then a time comes, well, I want to change something, I want to add dialogue to this. So that first reaction is going to be, ooh, I'm not too sure about this, I'm not sure if this is working. So I guess that's where there is a little bit of a language thing as well, like I mentioned before, but there is a little bit of that insecurity as well. And I think that's where the collaborations and the teamwork really came in, is especially when we were starting out. Every time we'd have those kind of insecurities, it's always like, there's always two other people to pick you up and to kind of encourage you.
Yeah. Well, if it's good collaboration.
Like to whomever it happened to, it was like we were all going on this journey at the same time. It was supposed to be my real first kind of short where I've credited myself as a director. Every time I've done something previously, I've kind of said, animation or something like that. But
this is IFCC, the first time where,
right? Yeah. So that's what, and I had, a fuck ton of insecurities and doubts and whatnot in the process. I loved the whole process. It was by far probably one of the best experiences I've ever had. It was so fun. It was just like kids playing, but it was the same thing, Milan, he was a freaking pro concept artist at that time, but it was still like, it was something new for him. Like he never did something like that for a short. So there was a lot of pressure on him as well. I mean, his own, I guess, internal pressure, but we were there for him. It was the same for Iz. Like Iz's story is like really interesting in my mind, because like he used to do music. Like he's 10 years older than us. And he used to do music way back in the day. He did like a lot of like local, collaboration with local artists and stuff like that. And then he just kind of like the whole industry crashed or something, and he just stopped doing it. And his backup plan was graphic design, like websites and stuff like that. So he was doing that for the longest period of time. And when we met him as a graphic designer. And then through this kind of, we shared a co-working space at one point, and then I'm sure I told you the story before, maybe, but
I don't think so. This is your main actor and your composer.
Yeah, the composer. Yeah. So he we knew him for years, like as a graphic designer. And then one day when I was one of my earliest pieces, this architecture piece, I hired a composer for that piece. And he watched it, and it's like it's an incredible score. But he was like, "Wait a minute, you paid somebody for that? Like you could have asked me." And I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, I used to do music." Well, why didn't you tell me? Like I didn't know.
Many lives.
And then like he started pulling off his old stuff, and we were like, "Holy shit! Like why are you doing graphic design? Like why aren't you like doing this?" And there wasn't, when he was doing it, there wasn't this whole, I guess short films and ads and idents and whatever.
Sure.
It wasn't like a career path for him at all. But he's also like a huge like film nerd, and absolutely loves film and speaks film language, which is really important to have in a collaborator like that. And it was like, again, it was one of his. He was supposed to use that piece to get back into the industry, to get back into music, essentially. So there's a lot of pressure on him as well. So it's like we were all like moving along this kind of, I guess, insecure grounds of having some, I guess, expectations or pressure. But it was always. It was a very, very positive collaborative space where, whenever somebody would get down, there's two other guys to pick you back up. So it was a wonderful time.
It's good to reflect on that. If you think about that's kind of the perfect, it's kind of the perfect storm to have a balance between a triad of three people creating something, and then knowing the pressure that no one in the world is either carrying or putting that pressure on you but yourselves, which is brilliant, because I always think that like great art comes from immense pressure. I was watching Apocalypse Now the other day, it's a long film, so I only watched half of it. That's enough for one film. And I like to watch certain films just for scenes sometimes too. I don't know if you do the same thing. I think it's probably sacrilege, and the filmmaker would probably hate me for it, but I love to just watch certain scenes.
If you watch it like 10 times, I think it's fine.
That's true. I haven't watched Apocalypse Now 10 times, but I've watched it at least maybe 3 or 4 times to completion.
Well, yeah.
That's enough. But I do feel bad. I feel like, fuck, Francis would be so angry. But I
think he'd be flattered.
Well, I mean, it's a brilliant film, but there's a documentary that his wife made called Heart of Darkness, I think, of following him making that film.
I haven't seen it yet. I've heard amazing things, but I haven't seen it. I don't know where to find it actually, but I've heard so many good things about it.
It's on there floating around on the web in ones and zeros. You can find it, I'm sure. Yeah.
Ones and zeros. Just open them ones and zeros up, and there it is.
There's a ton of ones and zeros in it. But that film nearly killed that guy. Like, you could see it in his face. Like, and what I talked about, enormous pressures, like whether you put them on yourself or the world themselves is putting it on you, it's something for you to put on yourself. And I think that there's some weird thing about the human spirit. Again, my whole process with the podcast personally is to get into these conversations because I'm trying to find the equation of what's going on. And one of the things I'm realizing that keeps happening is that artists under enormous pressure have, I think, like, I would hear Ridley Scott say it, like, and I know this is an old saying, but necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that when you go and you tap into this old primal thing where it's connected to the human spirit, you know, overcoming adversity, trying things, pushing yourself beyond your own boundaries, that somehow gets translated into the art. And then that is what resonates with your viewer, whether they know it or not. It's almost like a really beautiful support system inside of a sonic sound of music or something. There's some sort of universal thing, depending on what your value system is. But I think that there's a universal thing across. You can show a piece of art that has that resonance to an entire population of different cultures, and you probably get similar reactions to it. Some sort of acknowledgement of its brilliance, and then some sort of desire to learn more about it. You know, I don't know. This is just theories that I have running in my head all the time because I'm trying to figure out why the hell are we doing this stuff?
Well, that's a good question. One that I don't have the answer for. I probably need to be digging a lot further. Yeah. Yeah. Like, why the hell do you do this? But yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely like how I feel about, you know, again, like going back to the previous kind of constraints and, you know, the purely visual films that I've done before. It was always about like layering in the kind of the subtext, and not to say that there's a ton of it, but in everything I've done, there is like a significant chunk of subtext. And I kind of feel, you know, if it's woven in there in like in a correct, well, I don't know if a correct way is a right way to say it, but if it is there, like no matter that you're not really pointing it out, the audience will feel that there is something deeper to this story, even though they're just pretty pictures, even though there's not any dialogue in it.
Well, if you put it in there, yeah, it should be.
I mean, I feel it's like, you know, when you you know, no matter how subtle it is, like it's tangible stuff. It's tangible stuff that you know resonates with the viewers, hopefully.
Yeah, if it's doing its thing. You mentioned something that I took a bunch of notes as you're talking, and you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on, and in regards to this project that you mentioned, but there was room for failure. How important is letting room for failure for you, and do you still allow it, and what's the ratio of how much you fail? Because I always say fail privately and succeed publicly, but you no matter what, you need to be failing constantly. That's my opinion, but I'm curious about you, like how you approach failure.
I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of failure in there. So if you
how would you define failure? What would you say a failure is?
I mean, it could be, you know, it could be as simple as technical execution. It could be way more complicated as something like as not living up to the original vision and the idea of what the film is supposed to be. I don't personally think I've ever had that feeling. I'm always quite happy with the work that I've produced. It's never 100%, as you know. It's always floating up there in the 90s.
That's pretty good. You get in the 90s.
It's there in the 90s. It's not 95, but it's 90 to 95.
It should never be 100, right? Or should it be? Is that
know.
how you know you're not doing it? That's always been my concern. Like, oh shit, if you're happy, does that mean you're not doing it right?
And what do you do then? Like when you do 100, what then? Do you just
I don't know.
pack up your bags and leave?
Yeah.
Get your affairs in order?
Then you have to ask yourself, why do I do this? And then you realize, oh, I do it because it's so challenging. I do it because it's tough for me.
Yeah.
But then that's also a weird way to live if you're just having constant discomfort. So I don't know. But sorry, you were saying.
No, but I feel it's failure is just it's an opportunity to learn, I guess. It's as maybe, I don't know if that sounds cliche or not, but it is. I mean, it's like if I compare it, for example, with a lot of the client work that I do at Access is, what is it like now? It's been like roughly 5 years as well. Well, I think I literally started working with Access when we had our first podcast. So that's, it's the same time period. But I've done maybe 7 or 8 cinematics at this point. But I've pitched for, I don't even know, man, at this stage. It's been probably like around 40-ish, 50-ish, something like that.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's a lot of pitching.
Sure.
And then I got to do 8-ish. And then it's
pretty good ratio.
It's pretty good ratio, but it's a lot of those. Well, some of the projects that I've done you don't necessarily win them by pitching. Some of them you just get them handed to you if it's a good fit.
Sure.
But the point was kind of, like you could look at all those quote unquote failed pitches as failures, but in every single one of them I've learned something new, like absolutely every single one. Whether it's, just a simple thing of how to format the damn document, or, how to be efficient with references, or how to, perfect my previs process for the pitching stage, or how to do things quickly when I don't have the time to do the previs or do the visual references or anything like that, and how to kind of convey ideas just through words, basically just through a few slides, and stuff like that. And not to say again, like that stuff is definitely not my strong suit. It's kind of and it's almost like it's like a muscle that when you don't train it for a while, it just becomes, you kind of forget. So you kind of have to keep working on it. But yeah, there's I guess the point was there's a lot of those like unfulfilled projects that never happened, that some of them I feel really, really passionate about. Some of them I feel like would probably be some of the better work that I've done, but we never got to make it. It's not that it was canceled or anything, just somebody else got it, basically. A different
That's gotta be
studio,
frustrating.
Well, it is what it is. So it's frustrating.
What you just told me is it's fucking frustrating.
It's frustrating. It's not to say that it's like there's probably a good reason why somebody else got it. Sometimes it might not be as good of a reason. There's a lot of things that might there's a lot of underbidding that happens as well in the industry, and that might steal a project from you that otherwise had a really, really solid creative.
So this is another studio competing that says we will do it for cheaper, and then they go, we'll just take the cheaper route.
Something like that. There is stuff like that, and that stuff definitely is frustrating. But still, like I take a lot of the things that I've learned from those and I apply them to something else. So there's a lot of that stuff happening.
You learn. You learn what you get paid too, which is good too. Smart.
And I kind of look at that as well as kind of I have a library now of like 40 something unfinished projects and ideas that I can repurpose into something else. Those are mine. Those are, they're attached to that IP, but the core idea is mine. So I can just, kind of structurally wise, what's happening, you can apply that to, whatever you want. And I've done that a few times. There's ideas in some of the pitch stuff that I've done that I've applied to my own work and stuff like that. So it's there's always, room to learn from that. And but yeah, I guess that would probably be the long-winded, stumbly way of answering that question.
The failure. The rate of failure though. Because we talked a little bit about failure too, and I showed you another project that I was basically died, and it's so challenging now to this day. But I also realized like these are things that they just have to be taught basically, and it's like, when your appetite is this big and your stomach is this big,
I still won't accept that that's dead, and I'm not sure like how publicly we want to talk about that, but I don't want to accept that that's dead. It'll find its way to. I firmly believe someday, eventually, it'll find its way back to life. Yeah. But in the meantime, hey, Chimera, like that's something we also glossed over. I'm gonna flex so hard right now that I got to see it before everyone else.
It was really something else to watch you watch it.
Dude, cool. I thank you so much for showing me that. That's been inspiring as hell. And I don't want to probably speak too much now because you want to properly release all of that stuff, but it's been fantastic, as well, seeing how you put that together. So it's very, very excited to see it again.
Thank you. Well, I just messaged you last night that finally it's done. Yeah. And it's been a 2-year process, and it's been, as you know, with these projects, they become, they're almost like a war of attrition. It's like, how much do you want it? And then how good do you want it to be? And as you know, the mountain of success, as you start in the bottom, it's like losing weight. When you're overweight, it's really easy to cut a lot of pounds out in the beginning. Mm-hmm. But then when you start to get closer to your perfect mass, it's so hard, and you start to get to that point percentiles and then 0.00 percentiles. And then at one point you have to go, okay, this is where it needs to be. And finally hit there last night. I was literally like, I watched the latest thing, and I put my headphones down, and I was like, yes, and I was like running around the house, and it was like super excited. And my wife was like cracking up, and she's so happy for me because she knows how difficult this has been for me personally. It's just doing these kind of projects on no budget and favors and friends, and having a budget, but it's just like, damn,
Yeah.
You know this perfectly.
Nowhere near as the budget as it looks like, because it looks like a freaking $1 million.
But you're too kind.
But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing, I guess. Like how you say it, like when you realize, like, all right, this is enough. Like, this is getting to that, like the percentage thing that we talked about. Like, how much is enough? What's the And I don't really have an answer for that. Like, that's
it's a feel thing, like, right? You just feel
it's a feel thing. Like how you said it. Like, now you're like, you can tweak it still, probably. Like, probably
never
you can tweak it until who said it? Like, you don't finish films, you just run out of time. But
or art is never done. It's just due. That's always the thing.
So yeah, I mean, it's a really hard thing, and I kind of feel like it's something. I mean, it's just something that you, like you said, like, it's a feel thing that after years of doing it, and after, doing films one after another, whatever they are, like, even if they're short or long or simple or complex or whatever it is, you start to feel it a little bit more and more. And I think that's one of the, like, key important things is, like, it just takes time. It just takes a lot of time to get to that. Like, even with all the crazy technology these days, like, that makes it a lot easier, but
in quotes though, right?
Easier.
Yeah.
It is a lot easier in some ways, but that's the technicality of things. But the feel side of the things, that's what really takes some time to kind of manifest itself and to
It's so complicated. A thing that comes to mind when I talk about failure and also projects that die it made me think of this documentary. I know you've seen it, Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah.
And I've watched some of his films. I've tried to watch some of them at least. And they're hard to get through, some of them, because they're just like, all right, dude, what are you doing to me here? And
that's a big hole of a film. Yeah.
That's,
It's a massive hole.
Barely you can see the edges of the hole on that halo of that. But what I love about his films is that it's his films. And it's his films because you can feel it. And love it or hate it, that's his films. But when I watched the documentary, I said, this is crazy that this is more entertaining than his films were to me. And the concept that a failed project of his became a documentary that became entertaining and also a life lesson for all of us was wonderful. And I think that in the spirit of creation and the energy, because when you watch the documentary, all you want is for this guy to make this film. But at the same time, I think to myself, probably not. We don't want him to make this film. Having experienced his films and what he's done to me. So like if you've seen Holy Mountain, you're just like, what's going on here? And again, I think that I love that he's so unique in his brilliance of just doing his thing that I can't really argue against it. Because that's such a brave artist to just go, I don't care about anybody's convention. This is me being weird and being myself. And you're like, well, you got a lot of trauma and some weird stuff going on in your head. So, but also amazing. So congratulations.
It's honestly, it's something to aspire to for me. Like I guess like finding the right balance between that and the stuff that I go through when I think about making films.
Yeah. So you've gone through the process of like working with Access. I mean, you've gone through, that's a Hollywood system in a sense, right? It's like, we can't do things until it goes through this machine and like,
sort of like that. It's just a scaled down version of that.
I don't want to oversimplify. I don't know if that's the case. I've not. So
but I mean it's kind of it's similar. I mean I also don't want to compare it as well because I myself haven't gone through the Hollywood system. You know things from what you've heard and what you learned, but until you actually go through it, it's a different story. But yeah, it's definitely a whole process, and I've come to enjoy a lot of the parts of that process myself. It's kind of it's that like I said previously, like with the kind of the muscle that if you don't train it after a while, like it becomes a little bit kind of not as tight, I guess. It's this weird balance between the personal work that I do and my own kind of production and then the client work that I do. In the last couple of years, it's been a pretty decent balance where I've done my own stuff, took a break, focused 100% on my own stuff, then did a bit of client work, and then kind of seesawed between the two, sort of a thing. And that worked out for me at the time. But I don't know. I just think like after a few years, after a couple of years of doing that now, I just kind of feel like something needs to change there a little bit. I don't know what at the moment, but you have I have the benefit when I'm working on my own stuff that I have the full kind of attention to it, and I don't have this other client project kind of I guess clouding my vision or taking my time or whatever it is. And it's vice versa when I do client work. I don't have my own stuff. But then recently it started to blend a little bit. I guess like that's kind of the change that I wanted to make, is just try to overlap them a little bit. And I don't know, like it's working out, but at the same time it has its own problems perhaps on the whole kind of wider creative process that I have. But it's I don't know where I was going with this, to be honest, Ash.
No, it's okay. I mean, our thoughts and these concepts are quite large, and they make our brains wander because we're doing a lot of introspective here, which I think is interesting. And I know that you're a person that drowns themselves in their work. You're similar to me. It's like you just get in there and then you just like, oh shit, a year getting by. Oh crap, 2 years went by. And it's hard to take a moment to break and go like, what am I doing and why am I doing it and where are we going? That was kind of, and
I guess one of the points with the whole analogy with the muscle, if you don't train it for a while, is kind of, when I work with Axis, I don't do any hands-on work. Like sometimes I would do previs and stuff like that, but I don't do any hands-on work. It's a fully functioning studio, so I'm pretty much hands off there. And I really enjoy that. I really, really enjoy that process of really, just being a director and nothing else, basically. But then I miss sometimes, sitting, and doing some camera work myself or doing some lighting and stuff like that. So then when I go back to my personal stuff, then I can, I guess do all of those things as well. But then after a while, I'll probably get sick of doing all of those things as well. So it's this weird balance, like where you're constantly missing one and the other. Like I don't know, it feels like for a long time, it felt like it worked, but then I don't know, like recently I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I just need to rethink that process a little bit.
Or do a little bit of both, when you're doing it, like one thing I realized, I was talking with a friend of mine and I have a film that I kind of wrote, and we were talking about getting it produced, and I was adamant that I must shoot the film, even though it's going to probably be a detrimental thing for me just because it's hard to direct and shoot the film.
Yeah.
But I just told him that I don't want to do it any other way. I just don't. I can't collaborate with Greg Fraser, so I'm going to just try my own way. You know what I'm saying? Like, and until I can get to that level where I can work with somebody that I can see could push beyond me, of course, not to say that other people can't. It's such a personal thing. And I realize that if I let go of certain tools and certain parts of the process that I love, then I won't love what I'm doing. And what am I doing? That's for me though, personally. And I had to be adamant about it, where I'm like, no, I really, even though it's going to probably pull me in different directions I shouldn't, I should just be focusing on the scene and the thing and then that, blah, blah, blah. I don't want somebody there that's going to be upset with me just going and grabbing their gear and constantly moving it to where I need it to be. But that's because I love that part of the process. I love photography. I love capturing light, and I love how that intrinsically connects it. So I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe your next client job, you're like, okay, I'll do all these things, but I will control camera, and that's just something I want to do, and I'm going to do blocking and stuff. And I don't know.
Gets a little bit difficult with the studios.
Does it? They want to have control on it and everything.
It's not just that. It's just the whole pipeline side of things. It gets difficult.
That's true.
But it's
unless you're there.
It's the other.
Right?
And it's I mean, even if you're there, but it's like there's always so many other things to do in a day where you just don't get the time to do all of that, and you shouldn't. But I mean, that's really interesting what you just described, and it's I mean, you're so damn good at photography, man, that it's insane. Did you ever, let me ask you a question, like, did you ever, when you were shooting Chimera, did you ever have a moment where you shot it and basically like not even review, like this is it, like this is done? Or do you always, like, after shooting, do you always go through the various takes and the review, and then for example, like you've shot like 3 takes in a row, and the third one you just know what the actor did was perfect. You know that you had the control of the camera, and the focus was on point, and you're just like, all right, that's it. We got it. Feel confident and comfortable enough to not even check it. I just find it interesting. I don't know, like,
well, when you know. Well, Tyler and I had. Tyler's my actor. He's also producer on the film, and we did basically we built Chimera together, which is wild. But he had come down. He's Canadian. He had come down, and we had basically pre-shot the film. We found the locations and we shot it. So when we were doing all that stuff and exploring the film cinematically and talking about it and working through it, I'd already shot it, and then we had lost the main location a month before shooting it. So it was like full on panic mode, and we found another location. Had to re-block half the film. But anyways, there was a lot of moments like that, because it was me, Tyler, and my really close friend Jason, and Jason was doing audio. So it's just the 3 of us. So when we're out there doing it, there was a lot of moments where I was like, even if I wanted to review it, there's no time. We're literally and I'm a big fan of just one light and shooting with what you have. So it's just the sun and working through it. But there was multiple times, and I even with Tyler will know, like, I wouldn't allow us to have reviews of anything because you just got to trust that I know what I'm doing. And we would call it, we would have funny nicknames for each other. So he'd call me Peter Pans because I would get like crazy with the pan and I'm pulling focus and panning, and he would do improv stuff. And I'm like, shit, where's it going? And so we would, anytime I messed up, we'd call it Peter Pans and stuff. So there's definitely some errors in there, but we would cut around them and stuff. But it was always like a focus issue or some sort of funny thing. But you know, you just work through it. And because there was so much constraints, and I had blocked out everything to the T, focal length, camera setup, everything was really like, it was like, we have, I think, 3 days to shoot this things, and we're doing 40 to 50 shots, setups and captures a day, which is really fucking fast to be. Yeah, it's a shit ton. But anyways, just, you know, working around the light and the given light, and all of a sudden you have the perfect light and the perfect shot, and then a cloud comes in, and you're like, fuck, and then, how long is it till the cloud clears? Okay, you know, and then you just go with it, and then you're like, oh, you just figure it out as you go. But long story short, you just kind of fail through the process, and then because of necessity, I wasn't allowed myself too much time to be precious. I was like, I know this is where the shot is. And I think a lot of it came, and this might be your approach too, is a lot of preparation to get to that place where you feel comfortable getting what you need on the day.
It's way more forgiving with mocap because like you definitely need prep for mocap, but you know, you're just focusing on the character performance there, and then you have not all the time in the world, but you have a lot of time to figure out the camera stuff later on. Like, that's one of the main advantages of it. I imagine still, like, from that whole experience, like, you know, in the ideal world that you know, you move on to a longer form project, and you get the budget for a feature, and you'd still want to kind of retain some of the things that really work for you, like along your process, like instead of plugging into what's kind of the most efficient, the most kind of you know, the most efficient way to make a film, shoot it for as fast as you possibly can.
I don't want to do that.
You know, I still want to control sort of the I guess working the way that works best for you, basically what you've kind of fine-tuned and honed in for the past how many years? A lot of years. Too many.
We find it, you know. This is what I think is quite brilliant. I'm out here in Southern California, and you're out in Belgrade, and we're both finding what we're doing, which I find fascinating. You know, it's all a series of choices, and what you do with those choices, and how you maneuver those things. And I think it's really interesting. You and I both share the same issue, which we drown ourselves in our work. Can you touch on that a little bit about how you smother yourself? You've been doing a lot of work, you know, and where's that come from? Where's that fire? Where's that desire come from?
I don't know. I don't know, man. I tried to take time off, but I think I realized just recently or in the last year that I haven't been doing that as much as I thought I've been doing that, and it kind of caught up with me. I didn't really have too many kind of burnout periods in my life, but last year was definitely one. And I don't know, like I think we maybe briefly talked about it like on the first podcast, but my dad's a carpenter, and my dad worked hard his whole life, and that's kind of I kind of just feel like I have a very, very similar work ethic to my dad. And that a lot of that kind of got imprinted on me somehow. And like maybe that's the core of it. I don't know. Maybe I need to do a lot more digging to find out where it actually comes from.
Or not. It could be that.
Or not. Yeah. Or I can just leave it be there. Don't turn that rug. Leave it sit comfortably beneath that rug, and just kick it back in as it seeps out.
Let me ask you this then: when you finish a project, what's the feeling? Like when it's released, not finished internally between yourself and your team, but
when it's released online
publicly, yeah. What's your feeling?
The
moment of release.
Relief, ecstatic, like all of the feelings, I guess.
Okay. The next day, how is it? What's the feeling?
It's pretty consistent, I would say, for the let's say like a week or two after the release. It stays pretty, kind of ecstatic. There's ecstatic. There's relief. There's I guess being proud of what we were able to achieve and all of that. I do think that there's like maybe like a month or two after it or something like that. Maybe if I then maybe a month or so, maybe a couple of months need to pass after it, where I start to feel that if there's not anything new coming along, that I start to feel a little bit nervous, a little bit like,
That's
not necessarily, not necessarily work, but if
presence,
what's the next thing, what's the next thing, where do I go from here, what do I do next? So there is, I don't know where that's coming from. And that's probably the thing that kind of, that kind of drove me a little bit to that burnout point last year. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
Well, it's a question that I think is, this is something I've been doing a lot of reflecting on in my childhood, and why I make the decisions I do. I feel like I'm echoing a lot of the decisions, and when I start to really think about it, I'm starting to find some interesting things. I'm almost 40 years old, and so I'm trying to think like, why do I work so hard, and why do I do all these things? And sometimes it comes from a desperate need for me personally to be acknowledged, or to be I don't know, hey, I'm here, and those kind of things. And then the other thing is like, I just love sharing cool things, and also I just love sharing what I think is interesting. And I mean, you go through different stages, at least I have in my life, where, from 1 to 10, there's a stage, and then from 10 to 20, there's a stage, and 20 to 30 is a stage, and then 30 to 40, I'm starting to feel like, oh, wow, there's another like revolution around this cycle of life that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And these are just numbers appointed to things. Obviously, it's hard to really associate time and age, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely interesting, because I can definitely kind of, when I track back, the work that I've done and kind of how it evolved, you can see even now, like, funnily enough, like I just started like uploading my stuff to YouTube, and I'm going through all my old work as well just now. And it like, one thing I knew this before, but I kind of forgot about it after a while, and now it kind of remanifested itself to me. Like, there's an element of fun and excitement in all the older stuff that I've done, and then at one point it took a turn, and then it became a lot more dark and a lot more depressing and a lot more serious. I've had this conversation so many times, especially like right now, even as I'm talking to you, like I'm smiling, and like some people told me like, hey, but you're such a happy guy. Like, why like, why do you do such such dark, depressing shit?
Yeah.
And I don't know, like it's I don't want to.
It could be therapy, like you're getting it. Through it. Yeah.
No, it absolutely is. Like, it absolutely is. When it took a turn, I mean, I'm kind of half joking about it as I'm talking about it right now, which you can analyze that as well if you want, if anyone professional is listening. But that happened with Freight. I mean, Freight was done at a point in my life where I was going through a death in the family, and there was. It was like hard times basically, but it was hard times reflected on all of us, all three of us. Both Iz and Milan and myself were going through our individual kind of hardships. So that kind of infused itself in the story and making something darker. And Freight is like essentially is that. Freight is the story of weight within us, as we kind of described it. I don't know, at that point, the fact that it didn't leave, the fact that I found something, I don't know, interesting in that, and the fact that I was drawn to more heavier subjects after that was interesting. Because it definitely is not how it started. Like, you know, I kind of see, you know, IFCC as this kind of uplifting thing, and then, you know, even like the playground stuff after that, and then it all kind of took a sharp turn. So there was definitely, you know, a life event that triggered that, but then some of that is driven by that for sure, but then some of that might just be kind of fascination, or kind of with the darker side of things a little bit more as I grew more mature and older. Maybe, I don't know, it's difficult to pinpoint. But it's definitely something that's present even now, you know, like it's whenever we're talking about what we're going to do next, it's always, the themes are universally darker, you know. The way Irradiation and then eventually Beckoning came to be was both all three of us kind of went on this retreat at one point, and we kind of bashed out over a weekend ideas for stories that we would make if we had the budget to create like our own Love, Death and Robots sort of a thing. And every single one was, you know, it was mature, it was R-rated for mature audiences. It was and, you know, not to kind of bank off of Love, Death and Robots, but it's the themes that we're interested in. But it's like every single one of them was, there's like no levity in either one. It's all like very, very dark, serious stuff. And that's where Irradiation came from, and then that's where eventually Beckoning came from as well. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't really know. Again, like that's, I can very easily pinpoint the start of it, but I don't know where the rest of it is coming from.
It's a lot of years to be in that kind of stasis of mind too. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it has its weird. It has a weird effect on you. Like I don't know. Like at times I kind of feel it, but at times as well, we'd be making the most. I don't know, not the most, but we'd be making some pretty dark stuff, and then like we're having the time of our lives at the same time.
We're demented creatures.
That's weird.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's weird, but it's just it's not the enjoyment of that. It's more of the enjoyment of the creative process, and you know, the time that we're having. Like that's the enjoyment that we're getting. I guess like to the layman's person, like watching it from the outside, that might be the reaction, is like, hey, like, you're creating this, why the fuck are you know, having the best time of your life?
Well, because the process could be really fun. Yeah. And it could be really disconnected from the pain of the film too. Yeah.
I think that's that's probably the best way to put it, is being
with your friends, having fun.
Addicted to the process. Yeah, well, having fun with friends, but also being addicted to the process as well. It's weird. Like it's also like how you put it, like how do you feel when you finish the film, is like how do you feel while you're working on it. Like it's also a roller coaster of emotions, you know. Like for me, it's always usually, you know, like the start of it is by far the best part, the most creative part, but also the hardest part, but it takes the least amount of time compared to everything else. So it's like this weird puzzle, you know. You have the main production, which lasts, like, I don't know, it could last 6 months, it could last 2 years, but when you know what you're making, you kind of just have to show up and make it, you know. It's like going to work. So that stuff, you know, is a lot of work, but it's not necessarily hard in some ways, you know. So it just is this weird, I don't know, amalgamation of things. Like, why the hell do we do this?
Yeah, it's a complicated one. Well, it's hard. It's also hard when you are a workaholic, and then all of a sudden you realize, like, oh crap, I'm in this. I've been repeating myself, or I'm doing this, and then, like you said, it's really beautiful for you to see that. It's like, oh wow, like my work was fun and joyful and silly. Like my open based personality, but then it took a darker turn, and why am I still in that cycle? And it's also wonderful to be able to see that too, and to acknowledge it, not because it's wrong or bad, it's just because it's something that you're in, and sometimes it's almost like you're hitchhiking through life, and all of a sudden you get in one car and that takes you way further than you thought, and then you're like, oh well, I'm in a different town, I guess I'll have to sleep here tonight, and then the next day we have this tendency as humans to, I call it like the smelling thing. I know there's a term for it, but you ever smell like a really bad smell, and all of a sudden the smell gets a little less because your body says, well, this is common and we're in the smell. So, and sometimes life, doubt, depression, all of these things, whatever they are, will creep in and they'll become a normal thing, and then and then all of a sudden you're like, not saying that we're depressed or anything, I'm just saying all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, you're almost a vessel of your body. You're not even looking, like you're not able to communicate to it, and that's really it's like you're almost like a passenger to your body, which is like, wow, fuck, it's hard.
I mean that stuff happens, man. I mean, that was like one of the things that happened last year as well. It's like I mentioned, like the podcasts and all of that stuff. Like at one point, I used to, like, the first thing in the morning, like I get into the office, I would just blast the music out, and that would be like the like the morning routine. And then even like when work gets more intense, like I would just be blasting it out, and that would be like I love that. I have a standing desk that doesn't work right now, but I love like working standing and dancing, blasting out music, and just
What kind of music were you listening?
And stuff like that.
What kind of music?
Oh man, like usually when I'm working, I'm just randomly listening to stuff from SoundCloud. So that might be in the last couple of years, it's been a bunch of like weird remixes and stuff from like synthwave stuff and stuff like that. I'm a metal fan at heart. I grew up with Iron Maiden, Metallica, and those were my kind of favorite.
Electronica is the new metal, though. If you notice it, they have the same breakdowns and chorus, different things, of course. But I was just talking about like how dubstep is similar to hardcore music, the breakdowns and the drops and all that. So I'm like, this is basically hardcore.
I could never go into dubstep though. Like that's I
there's
tried.
Good versions of everything. I feel
hard.
like there's great versions of country music. It's just knowing the nuance and being introduced to it properly. So But the mainstream, I think.
But that was.
All right. Sorry, you get the music, you're pumped.
No, absolutely. But that was the whole part of the process. And then, podcasts, like, all right, same thing. Like, it's super inspirational for me to listen to. And then at one point I realized, like, it's been weeks. I've been working for like weeks and I haven't even like played a single track. Like, it's just been like dead silent in the office. And I'm like, what the hell is happening?
I love the feeling of bringing music back in.
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah. Immediately, like you brought life back in, basically. So it's
interesting.
I mean, it's had a big impact on my life recently as well. It's one of those things, like I kind of realized as well at one point. I think it was like last year or something. I was doing just a random like Q&A on Instagram, and this friend of mine asked me, like, a guy I know from one of the conferences. He asked me, like, hey, what are your hobbies? And I realized, like, holy shit, I don't have a single fucking hobby to name. Like, literally not a single hobby to name. Like, I used to have, literally, like all of my hobbies sort of became work.
But let me ask you a question though. Should you have a hobby?
I don't know, man. It just felt weird that I don't.
Why is that? Because everybody else does.
I think it felt weird for me because it was like, the feeling I had was like, am I so entrenched in this work that this is literally like all I am?
That's it.
And that's
how
like,
you become prolific though. Your output's insane.
It is, and then that's also how you have a breakdown mid-year. So
there's a cost to everything.
So I mean, but it was an interesting thing. Like everything kind of funneled into it. It's not necessarily that I need one, but it's something that was just interesting to think of.
Do you have one now?
Oh yeah, I do.
Sorry,
it's correct. No, I absolutely do, and I love it. It's collecting records, and that's in huge part due to Danilo, who's like
he loves
like his
albums
story.
and stuff, yeah.
Oh my, has had a whole life of that basically, but that was it's it's just this. I'm not a huge record geek or anything like that. It's just fun and interesting to me to, again, as cliche as it maybe sounds, it's an analog thing to help me get away from the digital thing and from the computer.
Yeah, man.
It's something that I can go out and I can seek it out, and I can just spend some time in shops just flicking through records, and then I have to stand up from sitting down and change the record and all of that stuff. I don't have a fancy player, I don't have a fancy equipment, nothing like that. It's just something I like to do. So it's just like weird stuff like that.
There's been a big return to a lot of people collecting records and having records in their lives, I think, again, which has been wonderful to see, because I love music, and music is a beautiful thing, and music in its old form via records. I mean, growing up, it was like we had CDs and it was all about the album art and reading the lyrics and like going through that process and that unwrapping, that unraveling of something special. And now it's like I've been listening to some brilliant bands and I can't even remember their names, and it's like so unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because the music,
I feel like it must be the same thing, man. It's like technology is such a big part of everyone's lives now that like a lot of people just are trying to escape it and are trying to find an analog replacement for something, whether it's a hobby or whatever it is, just to kind of distance themselves a little bit from that. I think it's super important. It's like,
we should talk about AI art a little bit too, because I know that you have your own opinions on
I know it's
very topical.
This was coming. I mean, I don't. It's like I've binged watched all like Steven Zapata's videos, and I watched your podcast and Maciej's podcast on the topic. And
what do you think after listening to all of our? Because we have, I mean, I try to be in the middle as much as possible. But Steven's definitely on his side as well, and then I've heard people on the other side who are like full pro it and stuff. But I'm curious what you think.
No, I think I'm sort of in the middle as well. So when the whole thing came out, it's again the whole horrible predictions thing like I had with Unreal. I think like whatever version of Midjourney when it came out, and it was like all kind of squiggly but it could reproduce colors and light really well. I felt like, well, this is neat. Like this is nice for color keys and stuff like that, and like just pulling together a bunch of ideas for lighting and stuff like that, but it's not really usable. And a lot of people are saying like, oh, this is going to replace concept art. And I'm like, this is never fucking going to replace concept art. This is, maybe in a couple of maybe in a couple of years. I said this is going to take 5 years to get to a place where it's decent. Literally like 3 months later, it was like, holy shit, what happened? So I'm horrible with that. So don't listen to me. But
or actually maybe you're good because your bad assessments are actually the opposite of what's happening. So you could just go like, I think it's going to be 5 years, and then you go, it's probably more like 3 to 5 months, and then
to be honest, like I
think it surprised all of us. Honestly, none of us. I mean,
it surprised everyone. Like, there's no way. Like the how fast it happened. I don't know if did you see the latest video things? No. They're doing the same thing to video now. Like it works already. There's two examples that I've seen. There's one example where it's like
to it. I'd like to see it.
I'll try to find. I think I have it somewhere. But there's one example where it's like it's a pretty bad example, but it just showcases that it works. It says like you have text on one end, and basically like each paragraph is a shot. So it's like a penguin surfing on a surfboard, and then the penguin walks on the beach, waves to the camera. The penguin picks up the balls or whatever. Like there's like ball pits, like the colorful ball pits. Oh, I realized that first thing came out so wrong. But then
I just let it go. Keep going.
And then the penguin ends up on like a high mountain or something, and it literally does all of those things. In a video form. It's janky as fuck, but again,
it doesn't matter because look at like the beginning.
But again, give it a month.
Yeah. Okay.
At this point, it's like, give it a month.
Yeah.
And there was the other one which looked way more decent, which was something like a couple walking in the rain with an umbrella. And it looked pretty, you can see that it had like a huge kind of photographic input in it, but it's still like it's very squiggly and blurry and whatnot.
Sure.
But it works. Like it works. That's the point. And it's gonna work even better. I think it's after all of the discussions. I mean, I've never actually used. Not even ChatGPT, and I do want to try that one. But I've never used them. On one end, it was out of laziness when it first came out. I was doing other stuff, and I just didn't have time, and I didn't see kind of value for me in it.
Sure.
And then when it actually got where it is to today, I just felt like this is just wrong on so many levels. And then all of the when I saw Steven's video, that was just like crystallized everything so perfectly. And I think like in general, like, and I don't know if you've seen like all of the lawsuits that went out just now.
This is tsunami happening. I was like, well, this is going to happen.
I mean, it was going to happen. It was going to happen. Yeah. Like there was at one point, it was a little bit disappointing where when there was a collage of images of like, hey, you can clearly see that those are kind of watermarks from Getty Images, from Adobe stock, from whatever. Yeah. I was thinking like, holy shit, like there's Adobe stock on there. So Adobe must be the ones who's going to sue them first. But then literally like one day later, Adobe stated that, we're fine with AI art being sold on our platform, on our stock platform. Like literally a day after, I'm like,
well, because it's big business. It's two big businesses. They're like, we can either fight each other or collaborate. And then I think that's really my assessment.
I think the collaborate thing is going to prevail. I guess like the biggest thing at the core of it is the ethics of it. The technology is not going anywhere.
Yeah, technology is fucking cool. Super cool.
It's cool. It's insane how cool it is, and it's just like everyone got scared, rightfully so, that it got here so fast. Like it was the last thing on the list that AI was supposed to automate, and it's the first thing that actually happened.
Yeah,
so it's just
what
like,
the hell, man?
Wait, we didn't like
fix our UVs,
Yeah. It was like, we didn't talk about this. Come on, let's fix all the other stuff first.
Let's fix politics and like global economics first. Like let's fix.
I'm not sure if I'm willing to let AI do that.
I would rather something else. Yeah.
Something else. Yeah. I don't know.
Come on, join me in my utopia view. This is how little I know about global economics.
Skynet utopia.
Well, it's coming.
That's the AI. It's hell yeah, it's coming. But the technology is definitely it's impressive and it's interesting and it's exciting, and it's definitely staying. Like there's no way that this gets canceled, and I think that's the point that a lot of the concept artists that are, again, rightfully so afraid, are scared for. It's never the point of canceling it. It's just fixing the copyright issue, fixing the ethics issue.
Yeah,
I think there's a big. We talked about it the other day. Like, imagine, again, like Milan, my concept art friend. Like, imagine if he can, where we get into the production of Beckoning. And we haven't even talked about that, but the proof of concept film that I'm developing right now. But if we get into the whole point we're doing that, and the whole kind of idea behind that is we're doing that with a super small crew, super independent, something that hopefully, I mean, that's the idea, but something that used to take super large team and large studios is now possible due to technology to do with smaller teams. So this is another example of where that can happen if the whole kind of copyright ethics stuff are being taken care of. What if there's a tool, like a tool that you can install locally, where Milan can feed the AI with his own work?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
He has, So he's gonna feed his own work train just the aesthetics, just the general style and the aesthetics, just train a model off of his own work, his own work alone. And then he inputs the specifics. So now, for example, he has a specific design of the main character for the film. So he can input the specifics of, hey, this is the main character. And then when it comes time to, draw all the keyframes for, environment concepts or just, lighting keys or kind of keyframe art, he can do that on his own, with his own style, with his own work, basically using the model that's trained solely off of his own work.
That's right.
I don't know enough about how it all works.
A friend of mine's doing it right now.
So I imagine that's like in the world where the whole legality side of things gets taken care of, that's an incredibly powerful tool. Like that's an absolutely incredibly powerful
What's
tool.
An iteration machine?
Where well, it's also like, when you have a design, like for example, for specific needs for production, like he designed the main character. So now he needs to put the main character in a bunch of different poses for a bunch of different shot needs where he's gonna do the lighting. That's like laborious work that he necessarily doesn't want to do, is just like redraw the design of the character every single time. He's the design is done, so now he's focusing on shot design, for example. So in that case, having something that helps you with the transposing the character that already exists is like immensely powerful and immensely helpful. I don't know at the current state whether, like, if you're training the model just based off of a single artist's work, does it have enough input to generate something? I think that's the whole point of kind of
that's what
why
makes
they're
it great.
scraping like why they're literally scraping all of the internet at the moment, because it's the abundance of all of the photographs and art that it's taken. Like, again, like I haven't dove too deep into this, but I definitely sympathize and empathize, I guess, with all the artists that are facing this, because it is like blatantly stealing a lot of examples, but again, I think the technology in its own right is definitely, like, there's no way that it just gets shut down.
No,
it's here to
and
stay.
Nor should
it's
it. Nor should it. I think it's a beautiful thing that we should definitely. But that literally the user case that you're saying is something that I'm investigating. I think a lot of artists are, but literally installing Stable Diffusion solo just on my computer and letting it process my own images that I feed it into, so that I can go, this is the blah, 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 this is the prompt, this is all the data, pull from this, and then I go, make me an iteration of blah, blah, blah. And then I can look at it the next day and go, oh, I didn't even think about that. It's kind of interesting and odd. And to kind of really get this machine to actually come up with some really interesting, odd things. And it'll get you like 50, 60% there. But if you're an artist, you can finish that thought, You can take it to the finish line. And that's how out of tune I am with the whole thing. I didn't even know you can already do that. But well, it's moving so fast. I mean, literally every day. I haven't seen the video stuff, but to be completely honest, it becomes so inundated that I have a life that I'd rather live rather than just going like, oh, this is a new AI thing, and I'm not. I'm fascinated by it, but I don't live it like it's my everything. I'm just like, well, okay.
No, it's and I think again, like, it's hard for younger artists and people who are just starting out. I think it's like really hard when this stuff comes out. You can't help but think like, well, what's the point? It kind of takes away so much from you. But I think it's like, again, like being fearful of it in that sense is like, it's not, the AI itself is not gonna take your job away, or any artist's job away. It can help the process, but there's still all of these quote unquote AI artists that are floating about now and like doing all these images, like the people who are just not artists themselves, who have just started using this tool as it is, like they're not gonna replace the artist, in my opinion. Like they're it's the artist who's gonna be using the tool to help iterate on the work faster, but there's always gonna be some finishing touches that go on top of that. Case in point, like there's no iteration of it, I think, that can survive a client project that we do, for example, at Access, because like you can generate some amazing stuff with it, but then when feedback comes in, you know how feedback can be detailed and into how into what minutia it could go in. And when we start, referencing like, oh, this shape right here changed into this, and the proportions need to be changed like this, and the color and the what, there's so many specific things that sometimes we go through that absolutely need an artist's touch. I kind of feel like, at least at the moment, that's not working. Maybe there's a version in the future which can take feedback.
Well, Stable Diffusion, you can augment the image and get iterations based off of like augmenting it.
You can get iterations, but if you do specific points of feedback, if you say, whatever, like you generate, I think
there's a way,
a Warhammer character, and it has a collar on it, and then you want a specific emblem on the collar to be representative of something. I don't know if you can target that specific thing, and the AI.
Vitaly was showing me that a long time ago. Yeah, because I think with Stable Diffusion, this is Vitaly showing me, so I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was like, when Midjourney was happening, he was like, I'm jumping into Stable Diffusion because Stable, you can get crazy with it. But he's also
I'm just
kind of a unique guy in his approach to.
No, I'm just that's what I was gonna say. I'm sure he was just doing it in real time, and he's like, oh yeah, look, this is AI. And he's like so fast, and he's just like modeling it all and rendering in real time.
Damn it, Vitaly. Yeah, probably, most likely. Now he was showing me, like, I think you could do paint overs and augment those paint overs and then have it pull from those paint overs, and like not even doing paint overs, but you're just like change that and this and that, and then I think you can do iterations.
Holy shit.
It's pretty insane. Yeah. And also I think it's the limitation is, again, it's just you as a person making it, I really think it really gets me to think about it, because my next big question and topic is to talk about process. But when you strip an artist away from their process, what does an artist have? And then I always think like you have your impression on the world, and that's really what's left over. Yeah. And a lot of things, like, and even like, it was funny, I was watching, I think it was Irradiation behind the scenes, and you were talking about how annoying it was to make things in the day, and like 3D Studio Max logo popped up, and I was like, oh, that's so funny. All of the programs have that problem, but then you're going past it. And I thought to myself, when you can remove all of these things, what do you have left? And then I think that's why we've arrived here so quickly with this like potential AI thing, because we see it'll remove all of those things potentially. If it continues on the course, then that means anybody and everybody can just write their own movies and films, and not everything's going to be good. I'd say, again, just like when you go on YouTube, I would wager to say that 99% of YouTube content is not very good, and then there's 1% that's really good, and a lot of. But anyways, that's just also like, maybe everybody is a director and everybody is an artist, but maybe they're not, and and then finding their own truth. I think it's one of those conundrums and those dilemmas that when we really face it, we go, shit, what's going on here? Then we're kind of facing this internal question of what is our point? What's the reason?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. I guess you can kind of make a parallel with kind of how similar it is to kind of what I'm going through at the moment is, like, one of the main reasons of why I embarked on this journey of trying to, independently make an animated feature-length film is because the technology allowed me to. Like, there's no freaking way I would have even thought of doing this just literally like 2 years ago. Like, there's no way. And now all of a sudden it's possible. And the two key factors in there are Unreal Engine, real-time rendering, all of the speed ups that you're getting with that whole process, and the environment creation and all of that. And then there's the MetaHuman side of things, which is evolving, and the MetaHuman is gonna, in the next couple of years, it's gonna replace so many things that that were only ever possible and reserved for like high-end studios. They're gonna be available to everyone, even today. The rigor that they have for custom faces, like, that's a perfect example of it, where.
Oh yeah,
you can kind of draw
the beckoning. I saw you taking your ZBrush and then pointing their rig to it, which is that was always a problem too, because you couldn't get the control rigs to match what you wanted, and you're
absolutely that's a huge, that's so powerful. But you can kind of draw a parallel with that, with what's happening with AI in a sense. You know, with AI, the fear is you know, like, hey, I'm an artist, I'm gonna lose my job over this because now I'm being replaced. You know, if previously we didn't have AI and I was still doing this, I would need to hire you know, 10 artists to create concepts for this film, but now I can hire one artist and he can use AI and output that much more work. It's the same thing with the MetaHuman rig in a sense, because previously, to get, you know, the facial rigs to that quality, to that quantity of the characters that we have, you would need a whole freaking team of riggers. And now you literally need just one rigger.
That's crazy.
It's that, and again, like I'm a little bit, you know, I'm simplifying it a little bit because it's not like when you compare it to like studio work, riggers are fine, riggers are safe, because in your typical, you know, let's say Axis workflow, because that's kind of what I know, or Hydra. You know, in your typical kind of day-to-day, one day you're creating a realistic, you know, human, and then the next day you're creating this sci-fi robot, and then the next day you're creating this fantasy creature. The rigging requirements on all three of those are completely different. And there's no, you know, every studio has their own automatic solutions to some degree, but it's always like, it always needs to be something custom for a specific character. Each character will always have its custom requirements, you know. So what MetaHuman does is it takes care of that basic need of just, you know, just a human face. You know, you can't really make anything other than that with it at the moment. I think there's some people who tried to kind of transfer the controls to like a horse or like a dog or something like that. And you can kind of do it. It kind of works. But still, you know, like, but again, like to a regular user, to somebody who doesn't have a huge budget, you have access to absolute state-of-the-art facial rigs
with MetaHumans.
And like when it comes to independent production, like that's the reason why you couldn't even think of this, of approaching something like this, and now you can. Now you have the technology to do that. And again, like I don't really know the minutia of how MetaHumans work, but I'm sure that there is a bunch of AI stuff in there as well. AI stuff which, you know, they have developed.
Interpolations and stuff, animation stuff.
All of that stuff. There's a lot of stuff that they have developed internally using their own. They haven't definitely not scraped the internet for 3D facial models, but you know, like, and that's the kind of, you can very clearly draw a parallel there, where like on one end I'm excited for the fact that the technology is allowing me to do this. But then
that's your career.
This whole AI stuff. And then when this whole AI stuff happened, I just kind of took a step back and I was like, wait, am I putting riggers out of work by using MetaHumans instead? You know?
I saw you mention that because we've both collaborated with a very talented rigging and artist, Lucas. You know, Lucas, and he's wonderful, by the way. Shout out to Lucas. He's just, I really love him, and he's such a sweetie. And so talented.
I'm gonna bundle up Antonio in this shout out as well, because they're the Spanish conquistador duo, which I love to death. So
I've only worked with Lucas, but I'm sure they're both amazing. But it's something to think about, because that's why I feel like when it all comes to it and I see people getting emotional and stuff about this, I can't oversimplify their emotions, and I can't marginalize the fact that they're in pain. You know, when artists are afraid and they're worried for their jobs and their livelihood, I have to empathize and be like, you know, that's unfortunate, because you shouldn't feel that way, and it's unfortunate that this technology is happening so quickly. So I have to be emotionally there for those people, because I want them to be happy and I want them to do their work, and no matter what their work is, I really would love to support that. But we're in this really weird space in the world where capitalism and consumption is so rampant that any of these kind of technologies should, like, if you thought about it, like holistically, if we didn't have this capitalist system and we didn't have all this stuff, which is, I'm getting into big things that I don't really understand, But if we had that removed from the way that we flowed through life in the world, this technology would be this brilliant thing that we would all be encouraging to grow and thrive, because we'd be like, we don't really care about how the bills get paid. The bills just get paid. And then we're just like, we want to celebrate the positivity of life, even in the darkest moments, and it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. Because I mean, when I think about it, I go like, how far out do I have to think about how we evolve in order to be comfortable with something this big, replacing so many things, and it gets really interesting.
Makes me think of remember Her?
Yeah. Her is the biggest film that came to mind for me. I was hoping that we're heading towards Her. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like scary how close it's getting.
Yeah, especially Chat GPT and stuff. It's like, wow, this is literally Her. Like we're like because the newest version of Chat GPT is hugely big, like massively increased in its ability to do what it and Her, if you like, we've talked about it before, it's like Her is just a film about how technology helps a human through one of the hardest things that we deal with, which is heartbreak, and we're so simple creatures, at the core of things. That's what I realized too when I was using it. I was like, wow, I'm so simple because these are the things that I'm getting inspired by. Like they're all the same. And I go, oh, like it's just image replication. And I'm like, oh, it's fascinating. Yeah.
To that point about ChatGPT, because I touched on it previously and I didn't follow through, but that's one of the things that I kind of dread a little bit using, because I kind of feel I might get super addicted to it.
Yeah, well, you should. That's its design. Yeah.
I guess it's one of those things where it's just a question of when you use that stuff, like how much of the idea is yours. And I think like that's the waters we need to tread right now, because again, like that as a tool,
you could write a script with it,
might be like invaluable to, I mean, not might be, probably is invaluable to the whole creative process. Is kind of, I want to say it's like similar to, like how when we started, it's like, all right, you're going to put up a bunch of references and then you're going to draw and write a bunch of notes and ideas, and something will click, something will connect, and, that's how you're going to make it. And then with this one, you can just have like a bunch of like paragraphs, outlines of various different ideas, bundle them together and see what comes out of it.
Throw that into the machine of making images, and then you have your thing.
Yeah. And it might be like, what the fuck is this? But then it might be like, hey, that's interesting. That's similar to what I had in mind, but maybe, it brings something to the table. But then again, like I have no clue how Chat GPT works. Like, isn't that the same thing? Like,
it scrapes as well. I think
it scrapes as well. But how do you, like with images? It's easier to prove. Like, how do you prove with words? Like, is that the next thing that's gonna happen?
As it should. Yeah.
Literally word literally. Fuck,
literary.
I can say it.
It's okay.
Literary. Yeah.
Literary.
That word. Is that world gonna come after AI as well with lawsuits? Like, how do you prove that? Like, hey, they use the same word that I have in my book.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's fascinating. When I was growing up, it was all about like learning perspective and anatomy and all these things you had to acquire. And I think like you're also a process person too. You love the process. You love sharing the process. You're quite brilliant at it. You have a Patreon as well that like supports you sharing your process, which is really interesting because it's fascinating, your process. Like, and I love that too. You'll release your project, but you also have this wonderfully produced piece of process that attaches itself to it, because then it kind of alleviates this whole magical concept. It's like, oh, this is all magic. You're like, no, it's not magic. This is actually complicated and like there's a lot to it, but yeah, I think when you use these tools, you remove a lot of that process, and that intel removes your identity, I think, a little bit. I think that's the fear for me. Like that's where the fear kind of comes from using it. It's like I said previously, like the process can be addicting. Again, it's really fun. It's it's, again, as cliche as it is, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey always.
you take that away and then you immediately have the final thing. Like, that's no fun at all. It's really no fun at all. So I don't know, like, it's like grasping, but it's also like, again, like it can be useful for, I don't want to say brainstorming, but again, if it's brainstorming, is it just a tool, or is it is the collaborator in that sense?
It's a collaborator. You have to be honest with it. It's a collaborator, and
it's not a tool. It's not just a tool. It is literally a collaborator. Like, I'm not, it's.
I haven't used it for that same reason. I think I have the same reason where I'm like, I don't want to use it just yet because, and I'm always late to shit. I'm like, Maciej is like riding that wave. He's always like showing me shit. I'm like, what the heck? And Vitaly too. Those two guys, they're always like ahead of the curve on a lot of things. But they're all, I don't know how they process it all. I'm just like, fuck, dude. I'm like barely trying to figure out this other shit. But it's really fascinating. But I think that was one of my big worries. I was thinking to myself, like, what if I just fed it a bunch of these like halfway ideas and have it write out a thing and go like, oh, that's interesting. But then I realized, maybe I'm worried that it'll affect my process of creation and discovery. And maybe I'm just an old person in this approach. And maybe, but you're right. You said it's something perfect. And this is something that was really interesting. I had William Landgren on. Have you seen his work? He's
no.
So his work's fantastic. But he's known for this thing where he's 16 years old. He's a Blender artist and he makes crazy shit. And like, it's awesome.
All right.
But he's really young and he's a savant in a lot of ways. And we talked in depth about this concept, and he said it perfectly that you just said, and I think I agree, and everybody else probably listening to this agrees. When it's easy, it's not fun. So what does that tell you about us? That we like a challenge, and we don't like to give up that part of the challenge because we know deep down that's what makes it special. But
I absolutely agree with that. Is he, by the way, the guy who made Backrooms, or is that a different person?
Oh, I don't know. I'm horrible with names. He did a project called Volta, and he just released another one. I'll send you his work.
Oh no, yeah. No, I know. That's the homage to your Veneta piece, right?
I won't say that, but maybe, yeah.
Right.
He's wonderful.
No, I've seen that. I've seen that. No, yeah.
Have you seen his latest piece? It's really cool.
No.
Oh, I'll send it along to you. But I can't. There's one of my favorite podcast with him. He was so smart and so unique, and it was so cool to talk to somebody of his age with that caliber of thinking. It was just so fantastic. So I tried to adopt him a couple times. William, serious, for real, still, please, I'll adopt you. We can make this happen. You only have like one more year. I can be your dad. But yeah, it's the struggle. It's the struggle. I think that's what we attach our value to.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's deep stuff, man.
Yeah, it is deep stuff. If I told you, I said, you're coming into this. You've never met Danilo. You've not met. All of your friends, your collaborators, and I said, I took all that away from you, and I say, I can just give you a film right now. If you can tell me what it is and what you think of, would you do that?
I wouldn't take it. There's no way.
Well, in hindsight,
that's
though,
why,
right?
like, I'm so happy. I wrote my script a year ago before this shit ever happened.
Well, you have the choice to never use it, though. That's what's beautiful about it. You could literally write and build things the old way. And at this point in time, if you do that, you're considered old world, I would say. Yeah.
I think so.
Which is not a bad thing.
Also, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I kind of like to sit right there at the on the fence, I guess, between the old and the new. I kind of feel like, like the first thing you do, you kind of have to, or at least like that's my kind of process and my code, you kind of have to do it the old way, the first thing you do. So for the next thing, who knows, I might let a damn robot write the film.
Shit.
It's the same as I said for Unreal Engine, like I would never use it, and then here I am, like that's my tool of choice now. But no, like seriously, like I think there's when you do something the old way first time around, and like you really learn how it's done properly, and then you kind of because you have the advantage of new technology coming in, you can find ways to kind of mix between the two. And that's kind of how I guess I've used Unreal so far, and why it worked out so well for me, I guess.
I can see you embracing this thing. Honestly, I could see you writing it and embracing it, just like you have with everything you've been doing. Which, because
I think it probably needs time, to be honest. It's not something like, at the moment I feel very kind of repulsed to the whole thing.
Did you play video games growing up?
Using it.
Did you play video games?
I did.
What games? Like Super Nintendo kind of stuff, or Nintendo, or I'm going back to the original stuff, like the original. Like, what were the first games?
Super old school stuff. Yeah. So no, I never had a console growing up. My siblings, or like my cousins, you would call them, they had like a Sega Mega,
Sega Genesis.
So that was like a bunch of. I think it was Sega. Yeah.
Well, what's a game that
Sega
comes
Genesis
to mind from your childhood that you used to play all the time?
Prince of Persia on like one of the early what was it? What was it back then? It was what do you call them? Jesus Christ!
PlayStation.
My brain is freezing. No. It was like a PC, but it was before Windows.
Oh shit! That's back in the day. I don't even know. But
it's like a desktop computer basically. It's like, I think it's like the name isn't the numbers.
Tangerine or something like that.
Pentium or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. Shit, dude. Fuck, that brings me back.
Maybe Pentiums. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. We had those growing up, but yeah, Prince of Persia probably was the 2D one. Was when
I've never played that.
I enjoyed.
Okay, well, let's put you back to that stage of your life and you're playing this, and let's consider that life can be somewhat of a game, right? It's navigating these things, and that's why I think games are so successful, because they're a direct mirror of who we are and what we do and how we process life. Let's put you back there, and if I say, hey, I got this key command that will give you God mode and it'll let you just slay everything, I think you'd probably at the time go, yeah, I mean, let me try that out. And then you'd do it and go, oh, this is so much easier. But then the next day you'd go, oh, I kind of want to play this game and deal with it. You might not even know that, but you might. And I think that's what it's doing. It's stripping us from that thing where it's just like, this is something that I like to do. Even though it's hard and I might bitch and complain about it and throw the controller, there's still a thing about this, you know? Yeah.
It's a good analogy, the God mode in games.
Yeah, well, that's what this AI stuff is, giving you God mode in a lot of ways, and it's like,
Yeah, sometimes if it's a story-driven game and you've played it a bunch of times and you feel like, oh, I want to play it again, but I don't feel like going through the motions of it. I just want to play it for the story. So you turn on the God mode and you just run through it for the story.
Yeah.
You get your.
I watched a lot of videos of people playing games because I'm like, I don't even want to play it. I just want to watch this person play it. Actually, Simone, my buddy who composes a lot of my work, he's incredible.
Yeah.
He got me turned on to this like whole thing with this guy called Summoning Salt is his YouTube channel, but he does these incredible documentaries about speedruns through video games.
Oh, nice.
It's so fucking crazy how gnarly it gets when people get like down to the 0.01% like second.
Yeah.
Dude, it's insane. It's so cool. Summoning Salt.
Did he do the one with the getting over it?
Maybe. Which one? Which game is it?
Do you know? Well, that's the name of the game, Getting Over It. Do you know that?
Maybe.
Dude, I'll send you. It's like no, So is he the one doing the commentary, or does he bring other people?
Yeah, well, he's basically
cool. No,
he's just tracing like, oh, this is like the world record of like Mario Kart, or this is the world record of Castlevania, and I'm like, and these are games that I grew up on.
Guy.
So I'm like, fuck, this is so crazy.
It's a different guy. I'll send you this. This is a new game, a recent game. Do you remember like back in the day, it was this game called Quap?
No.
It's like a runner on a track, and it's basically like Q, W, or whatever the letters are, and like each letter on your keyboard is controlling a different limb.
Okay.
So your goal is to just run, basically, but it's fucking impossible. You just can't even start because it's so like it's the brilliant concept for a game. So getting over it is like a new version of that. It's like a guy in a pot and he has a hammer, and you just need to swing the hammer in the perfect place. You just need to get to the top of this thing. But it's like you can't even like move. It's so ridiculous. And there's a commentary on the speedrun, which one will like the whole concept of the game is like it's so ridiculous, like you can't even move like 10 feet. but there's this one guy who speedrunned it in like 2 minutes, the whole thing. And there's a 2-minute commentary from the original game designer of that game. Like he watches it and comments on it. And it's wonderful.
I love that.
It's amazing. I'll send you that link. It's
getting
great.
over it. I love that. Yeah, there's so many things. Yeah. But anyways, I think again when I'm watching these, because I started getting addicted to it, and then I got really into like cycling and like time trialing and all that stuff. And I love that my body, my mind going into deep pain to overcome time and battling myself. And I just found that maybe, again, I don't know, these thoughts keep running through my head, but a lot of it's just like, I love that this technology exists, but I also realize that it's not the answer for me necessarily. But it is interesting though. And like I said, if you become a director and a creator where you're an omnipotent being, where you don't need the help of anybody, then are you happy? You know, like, I mean, because a lot of your value, I think, comes from collaboration.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally wouldn't. Yeah, that's definitely not my thing. Like I feel like I thrive in collaboration, and that's something that's that's at the core of the process, and I would not change that for anything really. The whole, this journey, this, what is it now? It's a 13-14 year journey at this point. Is always been to be able to do this with friends and to be able to do it quote unquote for real.
Yeah, but you're doing it for real.
And
but I know you're saying on a bigger scale. We all want this Nolan, Denis Villeneuve kind of. It's like this romantic idea that we have. We're like, once I get there and I have this Hollywood money, it's like, nah, it's. And those guys are looking down and they're going, I wish I was in your position. The grass is always greener, I think, So.
It's weird. Yeah, the grass is always greener, man. Like it's I don't know, like there's been like the question that I asked you earlier about like, the parts of the process that you would take on board. I mean, again, like some of the stuff that Unreal offers me now with all these kind of, with the workflow and the efficiency, like that's the stuff, like we don't do that, like that's not done in animation. Like that's like it's not efficient, like it's viewed as not efficient in like the studio system. Like you can't just record mocap and figure it out later. You kind of have to pre-plan everything. But that I kind of feel like just being able to do that with Unreal now and approach the cinematography like you would approach live action, like that brings such an immense value to the process of filmmaking that I absolutely like want to do that. And that's like how we're planning it right now, even though it's
for the Beckoning project, right?
Yeah. So if you were to plan it like in a traditional sense, to pre-plan everything, board, previs, whatever it is, so that you're the most efficient with your days and your shooting, that will probably be kind of more efficient production wise. But I firmly believe that this being able to have this flexibility will benefit the project in the long run. So that's kind of how we're approaching it. I want to repeat the experience that I had on Irradiation that I've never had. Like I've never had it. Even on Beckoning, on the little proof of concept that we did recently, I didn't have the same experience that I did on Beckoning. Like we had to pre-plan that one, and we had to pre-visit and all of that stuff. But I don't know. I'm so like what you said, like the grass is greener on the other end. I'm so jealous on the live action workflows that I want to bring as many of them as possible in the animation workflow.
Sure.
I mean, if I didn't have that on Irradiation, I think it would be a different film. But some wonderful things happen, just by being able to explore basically in the scene. And
well, every day you get up and you get at it, and it shows in your work because you just get up and you make it happen, and you find people that have like minds around you, and you surround yourself with that. And I think that's really the brilliance of you and your work as well. And I think that's what makes you special in this space and a big inspiration. I'm like literally getting a Rococo suit, and like I was like, oh wow, this MetaHuman mask, like all of this stuff. It's a big inspiration for me personally. I'm sure for everybody listening as well. There's two questions I have that I like to try and resolve the podcast with, because we can go on for hours, which I love, and we should just come back anytime you want. Of course, you're always welcome here. 2 questions. One thing that you're most thankful for at this current state in your life.
Yeah, I guess it's probably gonna be health. Health and family. If that
Beautiful.
If I can chuck those two in.
I said one, but it's okay. Yeah, healthy family.
I can't. Healthy family. Yeah. That works as well.
Yeah.
That would probably be the one.
When health and family are both good, then an artist can really thrive. A person can really thrive. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, did you already ask the second one?
The second one, sorry. The second question is, this is something I've been trying to do, and you probably caught it from the last episodes, is who would you nominate for a podcast if I can bring them on? And I'll try my best, but don't go crazy with me here. Like Tom Cruise or something. That's Santa Claus here, but is there somebody you think would be really good to get deep into conversation with?
I think it would be great, and I hope he doesn't mind nominating him, because I've only ever met him once briefly, but Doug Alexander is one of directors from Blizzard. And he directed one of my favorite game cinematics of all time, which is Diablo 4. Both Diablo 4 cinematics, actually. The one that recently dropped and the one from 2 years ago, I think. That was a 9-minute thing. And that's... I always say, my whole thing is... I work in animation, but I'm really infatuated with films. That's kind of where I want to be and what I want to do. And I never really kind of growing up, animation wasn't this huge part of my life, but video games were, and game cinematics is something that, funny enough, I kind of fell into that place. And that Diablo 4 cinematic is just some of the most fantastic work I've seen. It's incredible. And I had a pleasure of speaking to him once at this kind of roundtable thing, but that was mostly me talking, and now I'd really want to hear his side of the story and his perspective on things.
Wonderful. Do you know how to get in touch with him?
I can potentially probably put you two guys in touch, but that'd be wonderful. I'd really be interested in hearing about his process. More.
I'll make sure if I can get him on that I let you know, and then you give me some questions to kind of fish into that. And so
yeah.
And lastly, I know you have so many things going on. I know Beckoning is this project that you're pushing forwards and championing right now. Is there anything else that you can think of that you would love to share with the world that you're doing, that you're excited about or motivated about or want to share that you're doing?
Beckoning, I mean, we haven't really talked about that as much. We kind of, I guess, touched upon it in a few other places, but that's been a long while not necessarily a long while in the making, but just kind of building myself up to the point where I feel comfortable with tackling a feature-length animated film, which is still something that sounds very scary when I say it out loud, but a lot of the groundwork has already been set, so we're just kind of gearing up towards what's gonna hopefully be the next 2 or 3 years of my life. We'll see. So that's something that's obviously like very, very exciting. And there's still a lot of work to be done to get this thing lifted off the ground. But that's where I'm focusing all of my kind of attention and energy on at the moment. So that's kind of what's happening now, and we'll see. If we keep on doing this every 5 years, Ash. Hopefully by the next time we do. Hopefully by the next time we do this,
you have like 1,000 projects done by then.
Well, hopefully I hope I'll have one done by then, and
AI is gonna just take over.
So, hopefully I'll have just one, and hopefully you'll have one as well, so we can all.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, yeah. We can reconvene and share our experiences with, how it works on the longer format side of things, and how much AI was helpful or how much it screwed us over. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely appreciate you in this space. Again, you've been a big inspiration to me and many people here. I know that I don't speak just for myself. And so thank you for doing what you're doing, being so prolific, embracing technologies and working forwards and kind of, bringing forth your ideas and also being so transparent with your process. You're a natural giver and a teacher and a motivator. So I really appreciate you. And thank you so much for being here, celebrating Sava with the rest of us.
Well, those are again like the kind words that I don't know how to respond to. So I'll give you a virtual hug but thank you. Likewise, thank you as well for having me again and for all the things you've done throughout the career and inspiring me to be here. So that's something I can potentially never repay. But next time, Thai food is on me. So
that's how you can,
yeah.
Awesome.
Or some local Serbian stuff if you manage to find your way in my neck of the woods. So we'll do that. Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, bud. I hope you have a wonderful day and thank you for everything.
Thanks, Ash. Yeah.
Cheers, Sava.
Cheers, man.